How's it going, everyone, and welcome to the return of No Excuses on BTWProductions.com and YouTube.com with your favorite show hosts, Aristill.
Marion.
And Volcel, I'm here to bring you the latest news and commentary on the video games industry for the new year. But first of all, if you'd like to get involved with the show, you can do so by sending us email at noexcusesvtw@gmail.com, or you can follow us on the Twitter at noexcusesvtw, or you can join us in our Discord server, which you can access by clicking on the link provided in the show description underneath the archive on YouTube.
Yes, indeed.
Been a while.
It has. It's been
A while.
It's been a Christmas
We
holiday.
don't normally take this much of a holiday, but various people have been away and doing stuff, so...
And the timing was just kind of wonky.
Christmas and New Year's fell right on Saturdays, or in the weeks this week.
Yeah.
Or this year. So, that's why y'all got the extra week of breaking from the end of 2021. But
Yeah.
we're back now.
We is. So, on the screen today, I'm playing a bit of the remake of Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, or Shin Megami Tensei Lucifer's Call, if you're not in America and wrong. So, this game...
Well, honestly, I always thought that Lucifer's Call was a bit of an edgelord name.
It kind of is, but so is Nocturne.
Yeah, but Nocturne's like, you could see that as a subtitle.
Yeah. I forget exactly why they did that. It was another game already called Nocturne or something.
It was because they felt that actually putting Lucifer in the title was a bit on the nose.
Yeah,
I mean,
in America, we still had we were coming out of the religious right being the authoritarians in government, and people were turning against them really hard, and they were afraid that wouldn't sell or play well with that group still in power.
Remember, this is the country which had a moral panic over Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a bright moment of human history.
Yeah, the 80s and the early 90s had a lot of that.
Yeah. So I'm a little ways into the game. I'm in Ikebukuro at the moment. I'm about to redo the first fight with guest star Dante from Devil May Cry. I still say the collector's edition should have just given everyone a roll of those stickers. Because that was the thing with this game, is in the West, it was launched with a special version which has Dante in it. And the only real mark about that on the game box that was different from the Japanese version was a sticker. A golden sticker starring Dante from Devil May Cry. And it was great.
It was a silver sticker, and it said featuring Dante from Devil May Cry series.
Either way. But, yeah, he's in this game. He's got the correct voice acting, and he's hammy as ever, and I love it.
I'm sure I still have that box at my
I do
parents'
somewhere
house.
as well, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure mine's somewhere in my attic somewhere.
Yeah.
Actually, Ruben doesn't do the voice for Dante in Nocturne, I don't think.
I'd have to look this up, actually.
I'm fairly positive
close if it's not Ruben.
Because Ruben didn't do it until Devil May Cry 3.
Oh, yeah, well, this is Devil May Cry 2 Dante.
Yeah, the worst.
The worst Dante.
the worst Dante that we're willing to acknowledge is Dante.
Yes. But there's really no reason for him to be in this game. He's just there.
No, I thought it would be a cool crossover.
Yeah. Like, if you don't have this version, there's another character that replaces him and fills that role, but...
Yeah, the Raito Kuzunoha dude from his games.
Who honestly actually makes no more sense, really, but
not really.
fits the aesthetic a lot better.
Yeah. So, this game, what's there to really say about it? It's Shin Megami Tensei at its hardest.
Well,
and I always quit playing because I get as far as the Amala Labyrinth and then remember why I hate the Amala Labyrinth.
The Amala Labyrinth is just bad for all sorts of reasons. I've done the first floor of Amala, and that's enough. I don't want to do it.
You got to remember with Nocturne, this is when companies were still figuring out the whole 3D RPG thing, especially 3D turn-based RPG thing, and about the only innovation we got towards making that any better than just the base random encounter thing was you can see when you're about to get a random encounter by the color around the minimap.
Yeah.
And that's about the only innovation we got towards improving on your traditional random encounter based puzzle solving dungeon crawling JRPG.
Which honestly just made me play more autistically.
Yeah, it kind of does. It's also very unforgiving in the combat, especially certain bosses, like Matador, the first one to run into. If you make a mistake, you're going to get punished.
Well, Matador's not so much a. If you know his trick, you're going to beat him. If you don't, he's going to squish you.
Yes.
But he's not.
I beat him the first time without knowing his trick and having the wrong Magatama equipped. And it took me a very long time, but I did beat him.
Yeah, you could luck out because it is just hit rate and crit chance he buffs. But
I forgot he does Holy Star.
oh yeah,
I just wasted around debuffing Dante, and you just said, you know what? No.
Yeah, he has Dekunda.
Yeah, well, Holy Star in his case. Same thing.
Yeah. So that's the whole point of the Matador fight, is to teach you what buffs are. And if you're like Vol, you don't learn that lesson, and you just power your way through it.
Yep.
Well, I only made. It was a first attempt, so I didn't really have an opportunity to learn the lesson.
Yeah. So.
But it is a lesson to a lot of Western JRPG fans, because most of them will mostly have played Final Fantasy and things like it, where actually bothering to use debuffs is laughable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're just wasting your time because they only work for the enemy, basically.
The other thing it teaches you is... Oops, going to delete this. Oh, good, it survived. The other thing it really teaches you is the elemental weakness system. If you go in there with a demon that's got weakness to, I believe, force, then he's just going to take infinite turns.
Yeah. Also, Nocturne has the wonderful mechanic called Beast Eye and Demon Eye, where they weren't sure how to balance bosses to make them more challenging. So instead of just giving them more base press turns like a sane person would, they instead gave them an ability that they can randomly cast whenever the heck they want that gives them 2 more turns.
Yeah, which is annoying as all get out.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, the chief culprit of this is Mott, who does not have a big skill list to pull from. And I think he starts with more press turns by default as well. And he has Beast Eye.
Oh,
and so he can just give himself infinite turns. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Also, I have no idea what the canon name for the Demi-Fiend is. So,
The Demi-Fiend.
he has very prophetic parents. This is Jack Demi-Fiend. I couldn't think of a good name for him, so he's just Jack Demi-Fiend now.
When in doubt, well, Charlie Swaglord doesn't work in SMT.
No.
Because there's no socializing in mainline SMT unless you're playing SMT4.
Yeah, it's mostly proselytizing, and it's happening in your direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we get to my week, I'll expound on how the series continues this in the sequels.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
yeah, so having fun with it yet? You hit Grimalko the stat wall yet?
I have not yet. Oh, yeah, right. I pushed him far with these debuffs.
Because that's the real problem with Nocturne. Once you get over the hump that's Metador, is the stat walls.
Yeah.
Where you just bump into something that you just need to go grind for a while until you can beat it. Because this is an old school JRPG.
Yep. Thor, actually. The Thor encounter is one. It's not so much that Thor himself is tough. He's really not. But he's a marathon boss. Like, you do one rather tough enemy, then a second incredibly annoying enemy, I found, and then you fight Thor.
Well, I don't know where I went wrong then, because I absolutely mopped the floor with
Yeah, I don't remember Thor ever being challenging.
Like, in fact, I found him to be an extreme disappointment because he was built up quite a bit, and then I basically used him as a basketball.
Yeah.
I think he's weak to wind, so you just get like the second tier wind spell and just go to town.
Oh, what was it? Slunge!
No, Grimalka's the first big stat wall that you run into, and you're just like, oof, that thing's just going to kill everything I have unless they get some more defense on him.
I'm off to grind then. Desktop. Incidentally, Incubus's design in this game is very apt.
Well, he's been like that since Nocturne, I think. I don't think they've changed it.
I think he changed for the Persona games, didn't he?
No, he still has.
I don't think so.
He still has the big spiky dongus.
Okay.
Yeah, the weird like Amazon rainforest tribe penis sheath thing.
Yeah, which he uses for his 3-hit attack, by the way. He goes left foot, right foot, and then penis. So enjoy that image.
Yeah, best to recruit him to get him in the compendium and fuse him away as fast as possible.
Yeah, I need one more
nobody
level.
needs more of that
Actually,
in their life.
yeah, and no, I need 5 more levels. 5? No, 3 levels, and then I can fuse him the way I want him to. Although at least this time Dante hasn't decided to just up and delete one of my. Oh wait, I think he's about to do that. You gonna delete something?
Stinger has Pierce on it, I think, so it's gonna clobber somebody pretty good.
He doesn't use. I don't think he uses Stinger in the first time you encounter him.
But
Anyway. So yeah, this has been kind of a chip away game I've been at. I haven't really invested too much time in it the way I would have liked. Also, I've done this encounter once before the game crashed. This is the Switch version, by the way. Right.
yeah, I've heard mixed things about the HD port and its performance on every system.
Yeah, all sorts of crashes and great stuff like that.
The PC is the most stable now, and
Yep.
has, I think, a fan patch to stabilize it even more now. But for consoles, you kind of just get what you get.
Because it's an old school RPG anyway, the same rule applies. Save often.
Yeah, like save every 3 steps.
Yeah, as often as you can.
If you're playing on normal, the trash can kill you.
Yes.
Like a couple unlucky Mudos, and that's all she wrote.
Yeah, I had a great deal of issue with. What was it that was really taking me for a ride? I think it was like it was some random encounter enemy that anytime I got ambushed in starting the encounter, it would just use Expel on the Demi-Fiend, and that would be it. And that was all.
It was
Just-
probably Anubis.
It was. I think it was Daisoju.
Oh, him too. Wait,
Yeah.
Daisoju I thought was one of the fiends in Nocturne.
Might be.
No, I don't remember. Maybe I could be remembering wrong. For all I know, it was just principalities or something. Like there are a lot of things with Expel.
Yeah, I've found early on in this game, like you can run into Angel fairly early on, and she likes Harmer.
Yeah.
She-
Yeah,
it's rough.
they finally got her out of her bondage gear for SMT5.
Oh, took them long enough.
Yeah, Angel is.
I'm
now-
sure there
now
will.
got-
I'm sure there will have been an outcry, and that they'll put her back into it for the next game.
Yeah, probably. I think
So-
the challenge remains at this point, though. I got to go get Mara, just for the memes.
You got to get to near the end of the game for Mara. Mara's always an in-game
Mara's
demon.
always way up there. Yeah.
And he's like penultimate tier.
Yep,
Not the
Fern,
best.
you should have known.
I know.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
that's
man.
like post root split. Should have known again.
Yeah. Oh crap! He's dazed my Demi-Fiend. Why are you being a big meanie face, Jonte? Oh, don't. Yeah, that's what Confused does in this game, by the way. Your character can do any number of things, including just randomly giving the enemy your money. So, yeah, thanks for that, Dante.
It just makes you more generous. That's all.
It is, however, really good to use on enemies if you're running short on cash.
You never got smacked in the head and suddenly became a philanthropist?
Apparently not. Alright,
So
we have a
aside from
few weeks of backlog to go through. You've actually up to.
Well, even if you say that, I don't remember most of the first few weeks. I sort of emerged from a fugue state, and
Yeah,
I
you-
don't remember any of the good times. The good times are gone.
Well, I tried to have a holiday in Townsville. That didn't work.
Townsville of all places.
I mean, it's better
did
than
you-
staying home.
did you
It's better
actually
than going
get
to Melbourne?
did you actually get to Townsville, or did you
Oh, yeah.
just decide not to go?
No, I went, but I went Christmas Eve, so Christmas Day became over there. Christmas Day is never a relaxing day. It's always filled up with like social meet and greets, the cooking of the obligatory Christmas lunch, all
Oh,
that
it
stuff.
is for me. It was incredibly relaxing for me because I am not legally allowed to go anywhere.
Yeah, that's actually happening in town here now. But starting to get the plague has finally reached us.
You mean the hysteria?
No,
The plague has always been with you.
well, no, the plague hasn't been here because I live in the middle of
It's
the
just
desert.
a common cold. It's the same as anything else.
Yeah.
Now it's more bureaucratic busybodies flapping around as the big hurdle we're
Well,
encountering.
they're the origin of hysteria, so.
Definitely a product of it. Anywho, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole because, let's face it, no one's been talking about anything else for the last 2 freaking years.
Well, I would very much like to drop it, but unfortunately, it's a massive burden on my life personally. The fact that nobody will drop it.
I
People
would
need to
love.
grow up.
I would love to drop some true facts about it, but we'll get banned.
Oh yeah, please don't. Also, Dante's on screen being cool, so there's that. And now he's going to leave. For no reason.
Yeah, Devil May Cry 2 Dante's weird.
Yeah,
Cool is not the word I would use to describe him. Aloof is a better word.
he's definitely that.
Is any of the events in there acknowledged in any way?
Nope.
Like the second character I've never seen mentioned anywhere else in the franchise, and basically there's no story event that leads to the transition of him from being a wisecracker to being a aloof, stoic edgelord, then back to being a wisecracker. Like that just doesn't. It doesn't seem to happen in the storyline anywhere.
Yeah, it's they have all but retconned Devil May Cry 2. They've stuck it at some nowhere point in the timeline where it doesn't matter, and just don't reference it aside from the occasional cameo of something in an item
I
description.
guess that's the thing. Like unlike Dino, it doesn't do any damage to the canon in any way.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to retcon it. You just have to not talk about it, and it will have the same effect.
Yeah, there's a few little nuggets of lore, as far as I understand, that call back to it, but beyond that...
Like, the origin of Dante's fist weapon in 5 is from an adventure he had with Lucina from 2. That was after Devil May Cry 4. But other than that, there isn't any real impact of Devil May Cry 2 on anything in the video games.
Yeah.
The rest of the video games.
We can recruit Oni. But anywho, yeah, ended up over in Townsville in a few days of running around. Stupid Oni, don't run away. Yeah. So the only real nerdery things I did there was play one particular game, which I'm not entirely sure why, and I watched a movie actually. So the game I played was, of all things, Pokemon Unite,
Which you're going to have to remind me which one that is.
which is the Pokemon MOBA.
Oh, the thing that you keep telling me is terrible.
MOBA is terrible. There is that's just
Yeah,
kind
but
of-
I've heard that even among MOBAs, that one's terrible.
I've heard it's aggressively pay to win.
It's aggressively pay to win because some of the Pokemon you can have are just absolutely arse. Even though their toolkit's kind of cool, they're just underpowered. That said, though, I kind of hit on a winning formula right away, and I had a lot of fun with it. And that winning formula is just play Talonflame. That's all you need to do. Play Talonflame, and you win.
This doesn't sound like a good thing. This sounds like a balance problem.
It really is. Like, some of the Pokemon in there have just a lot of fun in their toolkits. Like, Venusaur is one I really like the toolkit of, because you can spec into Solar Beam and basically just run around death-raying things. The problem is, though, it just doesn't either do the damage it needs to or have the tankiness it needs. It tends to die before it gets really rolling. But For a stupid game you can fire up with a couple of friends and just run around in, I had a lot of fun with it, actually. I didn't expect to. I expected to hate every moment of it.
So what, did somebody blackmail you into playing it?
Okay, so, well, we're here. Just, it takes 5 minutes, install it. It takes about half an hour to go through all the various pesterings for money that it does, because, you know, it's one of those pay-to-win games. And then you can just run around and stomp on a few people, because by and large, the average age of the people playing it is about 10 years old.
So basically, you got your kicks out of bullying small children.
Yes, I am a terrible person. But yeah, as far as MOBAs go, it's very simple. You basically run around, you beat up wild Pokemon and other players, pick up all these energy orbs, and then instead of towers, you've got goal hoops, where you go and bank those orbs. And whoever banks the most wins. The last minute doubles how much you get when you bank, and yeah. The problem is you run into a lot of games where the only person who banks on your team is you. Because I don't know if it's just because people didn't read the rules or pay attention during the tutorials, because it
Or because they're 10.
Pardon?
Or
because they're 10, yeah. Because the tutorial actually goes out of its way and says, this is how you win. You bank. You put the orbs into the hoop. That's how you win. And yet, people just don't. So anyway, that was a good, dumb, fun time anyway. I don't think I'll really go back to it in any hurry, unless I'm particularly bored and just feel like stomping on some 10-year-olds. Because in two...
You really are just sounding like a bully here.
Yeah. I'm not doing myself any favours. But in true fashion, it is very pestery in terms of pay to win. It gives you a bunch of Pokemon to start with. It lets you pick one of, I think, 5 to start with and choose from, all of which are solid choices. But then you get showered with a couple because of events. And then beyond that, it's either grind a lot or pay to win to get the other actually worthwhile Pokemon. Yeah, like I said, there is some in there which are just bad. The other bit of note that I really got up to is I actually went to see a movie in a cinema, which is a thing I never actually do again.
I was sort of expecting that entire industry to implode after being shut down for so long.
It was already on the verge of imploding before, because, you know, streaming kind of ate its lunch. People don't want to spend $20 on a small bucket of popcorn. So this... Yeah. So yeah, the movie I actually watched was the new Spider-Man one, No Way Home. Which, as far as a dumb superhero flick goes, was actually a lot of fun.
I've heard resoundingly good things about it.
Yeah. So
I know that generally speaking, people are starved for any kind of decent quality in Cape shit lately, but
yes.
I've heard very good things about it generally. Like, I don't have any interest in watching it. It's just not. I'm not really that into superhero movies generally. But I was surprised to see like just sort of roundly positive opinions about it when so much of the recent stuff has come out that's been just held to be awful cash in.
A lot of the superhero stuff that comes out is just cash grabs, or it's kind of shoehorning in a B grade, not even a B grade hero. At this point, we're kind of down to the D grades at this point.
Yeah, I thought that normally you would reserve that sort of stuff for like television series and, you know, things where you can test whether or not your budget's going to be a payoff before you actually invest bajillions of dollars into it. But
nope.
Yeah, they've had a series of flops now, and I don't know exactly how they're going to, because it's not the same.
Keep up.
Yeah, I know. It's not the same production company that does Spider-Man as does like the broader MCU stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The money is not going to them. The MCU people have just failed over and over again to produce anything since that last Thanos one.
Yeah.
whatever it was.
The Infinity War one, yeah. Spider-Man at least has still kind of gotten its pedigree. In this case, it's tying the 3 live-action Spider-Man franchises together. They're all in the one movie now. And it is now officially canon, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man is lame. I don't think there was any argument about that, though.
Man, we got Castrum, really?
Ah! So yeah,
Now that they've had a good movie, though, I'm expecting to absolutely nosedive into the dirt with the next one.
yeah. Like I think the next one's the Doctor Strange one, which is essentially
they're definitely gonna flub that. I think.
Well, a lot of the Doctor Strange movies has been not so much let's write a good story, it's let's just let the visual effects guys have all the fun.
Yeah, but I think that works only while it's novel.
Yeah.
They've already done that movie once now.
And they've actually done it again in the Spider-Man movie. Go back to the Mirrorverse.
Yeah, I think that they're cruising for a bruising at the box office there if they try the same formula over again.
Yeah. So yeah. Either way, the Spider-Man movie. You've got William Dafoe's Green Goblin back in there. You've got a couple of the other villains. Although they had to do.
Is it like original design Green Goblin from the first Spider-Man movie?
Yes, that one. It is William Dafoe. The good Green Goblin.
Well, I mean, you say that, but it's also like the least compelling villain ever.
He is. He is.
Because he's just a goblin. That's sort of his thing, and everybody knows that goblins are bottom tier.
He's a guy who is one of Peter Parker's many father figures. It's kind of the running theme, but he drinks crazy juice. But yeah, they got back most of the actors to do the other guys. Electro, I think they have a different actor for, and it's just because they say he's dimension hopped and this is how he looks now, and they kind of just shrug that whole thing off now. Then, as for Sandman, they couldn't get the actor until like the 11th hour, so he stays in his sand form the entire time until right at the end. That way, they don't need to go back and reshoot all those scenes without the actor. But beyond that, it is just a good, dumb, popcorny, fun movie. Got the 3 Spider-Mans all standing next to each other and doing things, and basically peeing on Garfield's Spider-Man for being edgy.
I guess that they've got to do something to counterbalance the absolute catastrophe that has been the Venom franchise.
Yeah, that's the Easter egg right at the end, by the way. Spoilers, is the Venom parasite flops. It is the Venom movie Venom in the bar, and he teleports out and leaves a blob behind. So we're going to have a new Venom now.
Everything about it sounds like absolute ruin. Like the fact that the movie itself came out okay just seems like an accident, almost.
It does.
Like, I expect these things to just be terrible these days. Like, I'm not hopeful anymore.
Yeah, like I think leading up to the Infinity War, everything with one notable exception, maybe 2 notable exceptions, kind of had a point. And
yeah, and I do wonder sometimes, as somebody who's not really well versed on that stuff, because I haven't really watched most of those movies, whether those movies are actually any good viewed in isolation, or whether they're only good because people were being drawn along for the ride.
yeah,
Yeah, how many?
I think it's a bit both, a bit of both. Like some of them are good on isolation, but some of them aren't. Like the first Iron Man movie is great. Like,
yeah.
Iron Man 3, however, in isolation is just awful. Actually, even out of isolation, it's still awful.
Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy was decent.
Yep.
The first one, anyway.
Yeah, Guardians 2 was okay.
I don't remember what happened to Guardians 2. But yeah, so I feel like there are good ones here and there, but the rest of it almost just feels like filler. Like the first Thor was just barely tolerable, and every Thor after that was awful. And although I heard they did a really funny one later
Ragnarok.
on.
Yeah,
Ragnarok is great.
Yeah, The third Thor movie, I'm in the crowd that likes it because it's so dumb.
They got like this absolute mad cut snake New Zealander guy to do it, and yeah,
But yes, it's mostly a comedy movie.
it's mostly a
They try
comedy
to-
movie.
They try to shoehorn a plot in there and make this one serious business plotline, but you just don't care because you just
Yeah,
want to see.
people aren't there for that.
No, no one's there for
But
that. They're there to watch Thor and the Hulk do the thing.
Yeah, Hulk make funny man noises, and then Thor do things with funny Green Man.
Yes, and also Korg is there, and Korg just steals the show by being basically the most Kiwi rock monster you could hope to meet. I'm not even joking about that. He's got the full Kiwi accent, the whole bit. He's great. So yeah, they, at least with the Spider-Man movie, they seem to be setting the theme for the second Marvel arc now, which is all multiverse. You know, like that hasn't been done before, and probably better. So
Yeah, I think I don't really see their second chapter going off as well as the first did. Like, I know
Yeah.
they're trying to set up for it, but I've heard nothing but awful reviews of that Eternals one.
oh yeah, Internals has been just dreadful. I haven't watched it, and I don't really want to because that's like the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, I've heard opinions both from seeing them online and from people I know have told me about the recent Venom ones and recent Eternals one, and that they're just awful and a waste of your time.
The first Venom one, it was fine. It was probably about the most fine movie I could think of at the moment. That's not to say it's good, it's just fine. It's there. It's like for those days when you want to just eat, porridge.
Yeah, the thing is that I've already got like a backlog of video games and anime. Like I don't need a backlog of cape shit as well.
No.
Yeah, it's this thing with Western media right now where it just there's a better than even odds that it's going to be hot garbage, and it just
Yeah.
ain't worth your time
It's
unless
like,
somebody recommends it to you.
MCU movies, to me, they're like watching an isekai.
Mm.
Like you only do it if you don't have anything better to do. And the list of things that are better to do is quite long.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll get a nugget of gold in there, but
Yeah, occasionally you get slime time, but most of the time you get In Another World with My Smartphone.
Yeah, it's
I-
why they're firmly in the basket of if somebody really recommends it to me, I might check it out.
yeah. I'd actually recommend the Spider-Man movie. It doesn't. For the most part, it kind of works in a vacuum, but it helps if you've watched at least one or two of the other two series.
Well, there's one thing if you've got like one or two movies would be necessary to give you a little bit of context. It's quite another to like get on board the Infinity War train. Like that was why I just lost interest in all that stuff, because it was like, I'm not ever going to watch ReZero because I know I have to wade through an ocean of shit before it gets to the point where it's worth watching. Where it has context and meaning. I'm not going to watch Attack on Titan because I need to wade through an ocean of shit before it starts to make sense.
Yeah.
Likewise, I'm not going to watch Endgame in that because I have to watch all those MCU movies to get context. Otherwise, the thing is just sort of like a special effects extravaganza with no meaning.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, even if you want to go through it, there's still good chunks of it you can skip. Like, you can skip Captain Marvel entirely. She's completely irrelevant.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
right.
think I got the distinct impression that the reason she's completely irrelevant was because that movie was so roundly disliked, and so they
And-
downplayed her.
And because
Yeah.
the actress opened her dumb mouth on Twitter and
Also that.
Well, I've also heard that she's just awful to work with, like spectacularly arrogant,
Yeah.
and so they basically just don't want to deal with her any more than necessary. I expect she's going to get written out of the next phase, more or less.
Probably, because
By stealth, though, because otherwise the woke will get mad.
it should just be gone. Or she might get an offhand mention and that'll be it. I think, as far as I know, the original plot was that Captain Marvel would be the one to finish off Thanos, and that is probably the most distasteful thing they could have done.
Well, because that character is a distasteful person. Like the Captain Marvel they presented to the world in the Captain Marvel movie is not a hero. She's just a bad person.
Yeah. She is a strong female protagonist, you know, the one with the capital letters.
Yeah, it's not even just that she's a poorly written character. She's actually a bad person. She does bad things, and she's lauded as a hero for it because she's a female character.
Yeah.
And that's just not... It's not something that people will swallow. Even people who aren't going to intellectualize it or think about it in specific terms like that, they know when they don't like somebody.
Yeah.
They know when there's, this character's just not appealing. There's something about them that just makes me not really want to watch them.
Yeah, like she's got a character arc that's completely flat. Like she's a terrible, arrogant, up herself person at the start of the movie, and she's exactly the same at the end. She's learned nothing. She's achieved nothing. She's grown in no way, and that's what.
But
really
this is true of the modern female character in general, because in order for them to have a character arc, you would need to have them admit to flaws, and the politically correct environment doesn't permit that. It's
they've
too
got to be Mary
dangerous.
Sue's.
Yeah, and if you're a Mary Sue at the start, it's pretty difficult to have a character arc. If your job as a superhero, all you're going to do is continue superheroing, because you were perfect to begin with and you'll be perfect at the end.
It's why when a Western company makes a female protagonist the protagonist now, it's so dubious, because you can make a character that doesn't have any real changes, be a secondary character, or have a guide role. Plenty of roles in a story where you can stick a girl in, or a character that doesn't change in that role. But the protagonist needs to go through something in order for there to be a functioning story that's enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, unless you're going for a comedy, but that's the only real exception.
Well, in the case of a comedy, usually the leads are riddled with flaws. The whole point here is that you can't give the female lead flaws. That's the problem. The problem is that they are creating a thing that they believe to be a female character, but what they're actually creating is an all-powerful male power fantasy. They're making the character female instead of male and erasing all of the flaws that could get them criticized by the media. So it's along every conceivable axis they do a poor job, and it makes those movies pointless to watch and those characters pointless as in the sense that they can't play a role in a narrative and have people accept it.
Yeah, it's why you can actually see that people write strong female protagonists in one of two ways. If it's capitalized, then it's this archetype. It's a variety of Mary Sue, and it's just dreadful. Without the capitalization, though, it's a good thing.
Well, the thing is, if the character happens to be female and you just write a good character, people will like it.
She's just a strong character, yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to indicate that they're a female specifically, because it won't be necessary.
Yeah. Write a good character first, and if she's female, she's female. Great.
Well, there is something to writing a female character, and I think this is the mistake on the other end, is that for something to be a good female character, it actually has to be female.
Yes.
You need to have a character that resonates with women as being like them in some way.
Instead of just a dude with boobs.
Yeah, not just being a feminist or whatever, because a feminist is not a real person. A feminist is some bizarre ideal held by a particular group of ideologues. It's not truly something that is a real thing in real life. People adopt certain facets of those ways of thinking, but they're not the feminist, the iconic feminist is not really a real person. And
not anymore.
Where you get people who get close to it, they tend to be very unhappy people.
Yeah.
Because they're not living as real people, they're living in ideology. And people that's inherently preachy when it appears in a narrative medium, and people don't like being preached at. Like, people can write movies and other forms of media with very strong, moral messages and narratives, but you need to be skilled enough to do it without preaching.
Yeah, that's the trick.
And you immediately appear to be preaching if you constantly point out certain features of certain characters and how this makes them superior.
Yeah. So yeah, we finished peeing on Captain Marvel, I think, for a bit. So you can skip that one. I think you could probably skip Ant-Man. Black Panther.
Honestly,
you could probably skip as well.
If I had my way, the only ones that I would watch would be the ones that were funny.
Okay, so yeah.
Thor,
Ragnarok,
I think
that's it. Oh, and Guardians
yeah,
of the Galaxy.
that's I think something that is lacking in a lot of modern sort of light media, because I consider those superhero movies to be sort of light media. If you have to think deeply about the themes of it, if you are obliged to think deeply about the themes of it of a movie, it's not really light entertainment, and the MCU should be light entertainment. But unfortunately, it does tend to take itself a bit seriously a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Where I think it would be happier if they leaned into the fact that it was flash and bang and heroism, and got some comedy writers who can do something other than quipping and wisecracking.
Yep.
Like
granted-
you can set up a joke. People won't mind if you set up a joke and then deploy it if it's a good joke. You don't just have to resort to quipping all the time.
Yeah.
But there's a problem with that because somebody has to be the butt of a joke, and in this hyper collectivized and partisan collective culture, some group will get offended and go on Twitter and whine about it.
Yeah, I suppose that people's inability to laugh at themselves is a big problem. Like, the thing is that there are people that they can be legitimately made the butt of a joke in a politically correct context. It's just that it will come across as mean-spirited because the people who will make those jokes will typically be mean-spirited about it. Like, if you make a joke about Captain America being patriotic, it will offend patriots mainly because, not because he's being mocked for being patriotic, but because people will treat being patriotic like a bad thing in the joke, as opposed to making fun of the silly excesses that patriotic people sometimes go to. Like, you don't actually need to have an American flag on literally everything if you're an American to be American. But the caricature of a patriotic person probably will have an American flag on every wall. And those people do exist. I'm sure Ari knows a few.
I know more than a few.
Anywho, so that's basically been my week. Like, more or less just got straight home and straight back to work. Yeah.
So what was your sum total of actual days off that you managed to get?
Well, not counting Christmas Day, because that's a whole thing. Boxing Day ended up being a whole thing as well. 1 day? 2 days maybe?
You suck at taking holidays.
Yeah, I need a proper holiday. Like, I need to pack up and just go somewhere.
You need to go in a woods or something where people can't find you and leave your phone behind.
Go hide in the woods. That actually sounds like a good idea. What is this game doing? Frozen? Oh no, it's just an excessively long elevator.
Like in Mass Effect.
Yeah, actually. I think I'm about to run into a boss encounter. Again. Look, a burp. So,
I'm sure this aircraft comes down at double time.
trying to think if there's any other nerdery that I've watched lately, and no.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one bit of nerdery. Did I mention I tried to watch the Monster Hunter movie on the show?
I think you mentioned it last week briefly, or last time we were together.
Yeah.
Although I don't remember the second half of the last show. So
Yeah, that's.
I remember
that's one for
you. I remember you saying something about about a main character learning to use dual blades and then immediately forgetting how to use dual blades.
Yes. She learns how to use the dual blades, and that's it. She learns it and never uses it again. Mind you, I couldn't make it more than halfway through that movie.
I think that Monster Hunter is just something that a Western studio can't produce. Like, it would be like, imagine Hollywood trying to do Dynasty Warriors. What a torturous mess that would be.
I'd love to see a big name Eastern studio do that. That would be incredible. But
It's like the only good Three Kingdoms movie I've ever seen that captures Romance of the Three Kingdoms as it is. Because Romance of the Three Kingdoms is not a serious historical
no,
story.
what's
It's
the genre name?
designed to
Wuxia?
be
the genre name Wuxia, something like that.
Well, wuxia is the sort of like mystical martial arts type of genre, but I'm talking about like the Romance of the Three Kingdoms as literature is not written to be a serious historical document. It's written to be sort of like a fantastical romanticization of
Yeah,
that period,
Like,
where all of the characters exist contemporaneously with each other, no matter how many hundreds of years they're separated by.
Yeah.
But there are a few pop culture stories coming out about that for Western Christendom as well, where all of the saints in it, they exist at the same times, and there are things like that. But that type of story is not something that I can really imagine a Western studio doing very well. I don't really see it. It's but the closest thing I've seen to a good treatment of that is John Woo's Redcliffe.
yeah.
It's actually a good treatment of some of the story of the Battle of Chibi, but it's also kind of Dynasty Warriors-ish.
I think
So
I've seen that one.
I think that it's just sort of like intrinsically that's part of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, is that it has to be over the top because that's the type of literature it was.
Well, like, all that nonsense of people, like, waving a fan and sending 100 men flying, that's actually in the books.
Yeah, like
the
it's
original
not
story.
quite like that, but
Not
you
quite.
see, like, for instance, there are battles where incredibly elaborate infantry and cavalry formations are used in that, ones that are completely impractical to use in a real battlefield.
Yeah.
But like it's actually really good. I've only seen the Hollywood cut. I own the 4-hour long original version or something, wherever it is. I've got it on Blu-ray, but I've never
That's
actually sat down to watch it because it's half a day.
That's a hefty boy.
Yeah, but it's got all the classic. It's got a whole bunch of classic scenes in it that are just too silly to take place in real life. So it's Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take itself that seriously at all. Like when they run out of arrows, so Zhuge Liang takes out a naval fleet, which is just all like thatched roof boats out into the middle of the lake, and all of Cao Cao's archers fire arrows at it, and then they just sail them back, and they collect all the arrows.
Yeah.
Like it's just silly things like that, but
There
it works quite well. It works quite well. But that's the only treatment that I feel had the right pitch for that sort of historical fantasy.
Yeah, there is a Hollywood adaptation going back a few years now where they did Romance of the Three Kingdoms, but they took all the silly out of it.
Yeah, it's like it has to be larger than life. That's just the way that type of literature is.
Yeah.
You can't make it serious. And I think that Monster Hunter is the same way. Like, Monster Hunter should not have the same tone as Jurassic Park.
Sure as hell shouldn't be an isekai.
Monster Hunter is you could do an isekai, but I don't think that there's really much of a problem with that, provided that you handled it correctly. The issue is that Monster Hunter is intrinsically a little bit silly.
Yes.
Like, nobody plays Monster Hunter and is taking seriously the entire time the idea that this is all being done for the ecological good of the world.
Yeah.
Because that's the story, right? That's what's theoretically taking place, is that you are helping balance the ecosystem because hunters have been a thing for so long or whatever, that having hunters is just a natural part of the way ecosystems balance themselves now.
There's an awful lot of hand waving that goes on when people say that, yes.
Because it's silly.
It's
because it's
incredibly
really silly, but it is the basis for the entire story.
Yes.
Because these monsters are clearly so numerous that you need incredibly hotshot hunters to go out and butcher large numbers of them.
when they bother to acknowledge that that's what's happening at all.
So there's something inherently silly about it. And so you need to tackle that story from a tone which makes it clear that we don't mind if this is all just a little bit silly.
Yeah.
But Hollywood can't do that. I think they don't
There-
understand that genre very well, which
There
is what I think
apparently
is...
a Netflix series that captures it a lot better.
I've heard that as well. I don't know anything about that
Have to watch
Netflix
it.
series, but the thing is that it's smaller studios typically will be put in charge of projects like that. It won't be like the Hollywood Shoggoth
Yeah.
that's in charge of it, because the Hollywood Shoggoth is a humorless bastard. And that's like I was saying earlier about the MCU movies, is that most of them just don't do humor very well, because I think that the equivalent of that sort of fantastical historical fiction that is like originates in Romance of the Three Kingdoms for the East in a lot of ways, and produces things like the Dynasty Warriors franchise that we know and love, which is completely over the top. That is an Eastern equivalent to what I think that the comics franchises should be. They're supposed to be over the top, and they should not be ashamed of the fact that they're a little bit ridiculous, because they're trying to entertain ultimately. And you can have your moving stories and your great dramas and your intricate character development embedded within there if you want, but ultimately superheroes are a little bit silly, and that's what allows them to be larger than life.
Yeah.
And I think that there's too much attempting to be serious that impedes that from really taking off. Like I think that what's that series where what's it, the character that creates that town that's basically her fantasy so that she can remain in a relationship with that robot or whatever.
Oh.
It was a popular series. I'm trying to recall the name, but I
WandaVision?
can't quite bring it to mind. Yeah, WandaVision. Like, ultimately, that's a story that takes itself way too seriously, like ridiculously too seriously. And when they try and play that out at the end, it ends up having, like, revolting, like, anti-Aesop narratives.
Yep.
Because they treat her like the victim, even though she's done a terrible, terrible, tyrannical thing.
Several
But she's still the victim.
things.
She's still the victim. The story plays it like the victim because the story is taking it seriously. You would have to frame that entire story differently in order to bring out the drama that they want, because she just looks like a monster and nothing but. If they had made her the villain instead of the protagonist, she would be more sympathetic.
Yeah. Even when they're not trying to do that, like the Luke Cage Netflix series, I find incredibly dry. Because instead of, like, Luke Cage is a character who really needs Iron Fist alongside him, because he's a very straight, very serious character.
Well, it's basically a superhero buddy cop story.
Yeah,
isn't it?
basically. But you put
But
him on his own,
buddy cop movies are never serious at their core. They're always hijinks.
yeah. But if you only have one side of that dynamic, it just doesn't work. Especially when they
it's 'cause
start spouting about racisms.
They're taking it too seriously. They're taking the character of Luke Cage too seriously in his own right, when he is a vector for entertainment. All these characters are supposed to be vectors for entertainment. They're not supposed to be a grand artistic vision that has to be realised in isolation. They're designed to entertain, and you need, in order to be successful, to identify the mechanism by which they entertain people.
Yeah.
Like the Hulk doesn't actually entertain people by spending all of its time dwelling on Bruce Banner's issues.
No,
The Hulk is entertaining when he grabs Loki by the foot and then smacks him against the floor a ridiculous number of times while he's trying to strut about.
Yeah, and that comes back to basically what all the best of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been. It's the movies that haven't taken themselves seriously that are the best.
Yeah, and I think that Monster Hunter Hollywood treatment has run afoul of that, in that Monster Hunter is goofy. Anybody who sees their Monster Hunter character sit down and eat a meal can tell Monster Hunter's supposed to be goofy.
Yes. I've rambled on for quite a long time. What on earth just happened there?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we're approaching an hour. I'm still on your week.
Yeah, let's move on. Did you actually get a holiday, Vol?
I did. I got a few days. Unfortunately, I injured my foot quite badly on the 22nd, and I thought it was just, oh, well, I've got a sore foot, big deal. But by Christmas Eve, I couldn't walk. But I don't know what the problem was. It's like my amateur diagnosis is that there's a hairline fracture in there, and most of the symptoms are consistent with that. Eventually, after it swelled up and went down several times, and I got very frustrated with it because it wasn't uniformly getting better or worse. It was taking turns to get better and worse. So I went to the doctor in the end, and the doctor sent me home with instructions to rest it and take Panadol, which is what doctors always do. But they did go through the whole inspection treatment, and I got the X-ray and all that, but they didn't see anything on the X-ray, which is not strange because I didn't expect to, because hairline fractures in the foot don't show up on X-rays, although they didn't seem to realise that, but I found several sources confirming that's the case. Yeah, so the options are muscle damage, hairline fracture, or gout, although gout didn't seem likely to me since I've had gout before and that's not how it manifested, and it's not really in the place in the foot you find gout, and also my diet is devoid of the things which normally cause gout because I don't eat very much red meat, I don't drink very much beer, I mainly drink wine, I don't eat liver ever, and I eat abundant amounts of things that sort of counter-indicate gout, like peanuts and that sort of thing.
Right.
So that doesn't seem likely to me. However, what that did do is that when they did my blood work, I had very, 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 very marginally high urate, which is an indicator for gout. So they decided it was gout on the basis of the flimsiest available evidence. But the advantage is that meant that they prescribed me some heavier duty anti-inflammatories, which did do their job, and they made the pain basically go away long enough that I could function. So, unfortunately, the side effect of heavy duty anti-inflammatories is that they make you feel hungover all the time while preventing you from drinking alcohol.
Oh. So all the downsides and none of the benefits.
Basically, yeah. I got used to it eventually. My stomach stopped churning after a few days of taking them, and I got back stable, and then my foot stopped hurting eventually, and then I went off them, and now my foot has started hurting again, so I guess I'm going to go back on them, but I have to wait for the alcohol to drain out of my system first. I don't need to have any stomach ulcers, thanks. Yeah, so gaming wise, for the first part of the holiday I mainly spent my time playing Final Fantasy, not even really Endwalker. Like, I don't know where we left off with Endwalker, and there's limits to what we can talk about because Fern hasn't made that much progress yet because he's still fighting Leviathan Q Savage.
Yeah.
And I don't see that that's going to end anytime soon. I don't know that there are any servers which have shorter queues, although there is a way to change which world you're queuing for on your way in, apparently.
Apparently, but I've tried that and it didn't make any difference.
Right, yeah, because the thing is the data centers are sort of bound to each other to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And the login servers sort of cooperate with that. But yeah, I think from what I can tell, it's the same everywhere.
Yeah,
and Leviathan is sort of middle of the pack.
I've got friends over on Crystal, namely specifically Goblins, and they say they've got much better queue. It's not like Leviathan Primal is basically the worst data center for queue. That's where all the streamers are.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Not necessarily on Leviathan, but on Primal.
Yeah, the only one
I hadn't heard that. I'd heard that they'd gone to a different one, but I mean, I don't follow streamers, so.
I saw a chart, and the only one of note on our server was Lucy Pyre. Everybody else plays on other servers.
But yeah,
anyway,
we'll see. But I've been considering maybe server hopping for a while and seeing what happens. But server hopping is not an option at the moment.
Yeah, I don't really want to consider that because I'm waiting to see how Oceania servers play out. Because supposedly they were planning to set up a system where they were planning to deploy in February a data center in Oceania, which could mean anything. Like anybody who's an Oceania player in MMOs has had enough experience with Oceania servers to know that just because they say they're opening an Oceania server doesn't actually give you any information about what that will manifest as. Sometimes it manifests as, say, a server in Brisbane. And sometimes it manifests as a server in Canada that's allegedly optimized for Sydney.
Yeah, more often than not, it's a server in Singapore.
Yeah, sometimes it's Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
But until they actually deploy it, there's no knowing what they're really going for and whether or not that will help my ping, because I would like some help with my ping. My goodness, I would like some help with my ping. The problem is that I don't know anybody on Oceania, and there's nobody who would move there with me. So that makes me reluctant to move. However, they also talked about implementing cross data center visits in the future,
Yeah.
which would mean that it doesn't really matter where you make your home world. You won't be cut off from playing with other people, but you can do your day-to-day things on your local data center. But I'm just sort of sitting on my hands waiting to see how they're going to deploy these architecture changes to their server structure, and goodness even knows what that timescale will be, considering how hard it is to lay your hands on any hardware at the moment.
Yeah, I think a lot of these architecture changes have been delayed, partly because
Yeah.
of the hardware
They
shortage,
have
but-
got hardware in hand. They had hardware in hand that was earmarked for use for the Oceania data centers, but they may have repurposed that to try and handle the Endwalker surge. Because that's their immediate problem, of course, is the last thing that you need is to sell someone a product which they then have a bad experience with.
Yeah, which
You
is
can't afford that. That's worth more dollars than anything else. Which is why they're giving away such vast quantities of money in terms of free playtime, because they need that experience to be either adequate or compensated, because you can't afford to have a product that, even if the product is great, that people have a bad experience with because they can't play the way they're intending to. So yeah, that's an issue. So all the timescales for any kind of deployment have been shuffled, because the team of developers actually repurposed all of their internal testing hardware for players as well. They're running on sort of like a skeleton of development hardware now, because they need to have the play experience functional. It's necessary. Otherwise they'll lose their budget. So
still top marks to them. Like, they've recognized the problem, but so to keep the player base happy, they've stopped selling new copies.
yeah, which, I mean, it seems like a strange approach, but I mean, you can't suffocate the servers any more than they already have.
No.
So that's just the way of it. Like, it is more important to keep who you've got than to farm up a whole bunch of new people who are just testing it out or whatever. Because everybody who's a devotee of FF14 has already pre-ordered it forever in advance.
Yes.
So that's not a problem. But like, basically everything they're doing is the opposite of whatever Blizzard would do.
Well, yeah, Blizzard would have just kept on selling copies because it's money, and
Well, also, Blizzard have a philosophy of not caring about long-term players, period. And furthermore, Blizzard would never admit fault. Blizzard would never apologize. Blizzard would never give anything away for free, not new Blizzard. And honestly, no matter how bad things got for Endwalker, the fact that Blizzard was always waiting in the wings to compare with, I think has really saved their reputation. Whatever knocks that the FF team would have taken to their reputation over the debacle with the Endwalker release, number one, everybody predicted it. Nobody was under the impression this wouldn't happen. Nobody in the development team, nobody in the public. And number two, Blizzard has just managed to keep the news cycle completely occupied
oh, haven't they just?
with just an endless stream of scandal after scandal after scandal, and just catastrophe after catastrophe for World of Warcraft itself. It's just, it's deeply, deeply appalling. And I saw somebody had found a screenshot of World of Warcraft, which allegedly, I don't know if it was a real screenshot of a real thing in the new zone of World of Warcraft, or whether it was a shoot, but it was literally Azim's crystal from Final Fantasy 14.
Really?
You know that? Yeah, it was like a big monument thing, but it was Azim's crystal. It was a different color, but the shape and the symbol on it were the same.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Like
that's
this-
right. I remember that now.
I haven't been able to confirm that it was not a shoop, because it seems incredibly on the nose.
Unbelievably so. It could just be a
It's-
big fat coincidence, but yeah, this is Blizzard, so
But it's such a key item in the FF story, though.
yeah.
Like, well, for it to be a coincidence, it would have to be a staggering coincidence.
Yeah.
Like, this is not on the level of drawing inspiration. Like, nobody is ever going to claim that FF hasn't absolutely pillaged World of Warcraft for ideas. But the thing is that it pillaged it for ideas, not content. But yeah, so Endwalker is a thing, and I spent a good amount of time playing it. I've finished the story. Ari's finished the story. Fern is fighting Q Savage.
I want to play the game, but I can't afford to sit for an hour and a half to play it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like I've been happy to sit in those queues. Like the queue when I logged on this morning, I went to early morning mass. So mass finished at about the mass finished at about 8:30.
So set the queue running and then leave the house.
Well, I didn't set it running before I left the house. I didn't finish what I was saying. Basically, I went to morning mass, which starts at 7:30, and I came back, and when I logged in, the queue was 270,
Okay.
which is like 5-10 minutes tops.
Yeah.
So that's me logging on at like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, which for Fern would be 7 in the morning or something like that, right?
Yeah, I'd actually have to log in as soon as I get out of bed, pretty much. And even then, if you leave it any longer than like right on 7 o'clock, you're gonna miss it.
Abo logged in at what 10, 11 my time, and that was I think he said 700.
Yep.
He was at 1,000 at the start of it.
Yeah, so 1,000, but he took like 10-15 minutes to get in or something, didn't he?
It was
we
close.
we did one dungeon and waited for a few minutes.
Yeah, it was like one dungeon plus 10 minutes.
Whereas I came along probably about 10 o'clock my time, and it was like 1900.
Yeah, it spikes up pretty quickly around that time.
Yeah.
So I was probably like the last batch of logins before things really started to spike. So that's how the login curve is looking right now. Most of the 2002s have gone. I haven't been. I've only been 2002 once in the last couple of weeks.
I found a cause that has been causing issues for me, and that's my VPN will cause a 2002, but only if I connect it to the Brisbane server.
Yeah, that's why I stopped using them with World of Warcraft. Actually, is that it would give me unpredictable disconnect. But I haven't had any problems with mine. I use an IP tunnel in order to make usable pings, because I mean, like, Fern, think about what your ping is like. My ping is 60 ms above that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, without my VPN, I die on every Titan landslide. Period. End. There's no way to avoid it.
In there.
But yeah. So I've been playing that. I didn't really stick to playing Endwalker content though. That's sort of the thing about FF14 is that you don't feel under so much pressure to do particular things at particular times. Like this past week, I've been absolutely snowed in work, like to a ridiculous degree. It's just been exhausting and unmanageable. Like 11-hour shifts and that sort of thing, because I'm by myself trying to run 2.5 people's worth of work. It's not reasonable. But that means I've been too tired to do anything most of the time, and so I haven't been playing. I logged in today for like the first time this week in FF. I haven't had time to play at all, but I didn't feel bad. In World of Warcraft, it would be like, oh no, now I'm a full week behind on farming artifact power. I'm never going to catch up, because Blizzard designs things structurally so if you ever stop playing, you can't catch up.
Yeah.
Which is cynical in the extreme, but their metrics measure active users. So they need to keep you logging in. It's not enough for them to get your subscription. They need their active users. It's just not really looking out for the player in any way. It's just looking out for their next quarterly earnings call.
Yep.
But yeah, so the only things that I miss not logging in for most of the week is like, oh, well, I didn't do daily beast tribe quests every day, and who cares about that? Like, they're great EXP, but I don't feel bad if I can't do them.
Yeah, they're not going anywhere.
No, it's not. And I really appreciate that this game doesn't put a lot of pressure on you to play things, but the flip side of that, which is also a good thing in its own way, is that I get distracted very easily. I can waste a day contributing to some goal that is miles away, that is not really going to accomplish anything in the long term. Like I just spent a bunch of time working on various relic weapons just for no real reason other than, hey, I can progress this a bit today. I'm not feeling that energetic, so I'll just go do some fates in Azys La and progress one of my relic weapon chains. And I did that because I was tired and I found a new podcast I wanted to listen to. So, yeah, great. World of Warcraft, on the other hand, rigorously punishes you anytime you get distracted. So I'm glad I'm not playing World of Warcraft anymore. It's bad for you.
Oh yeah. Same.
But
Like I know what I'd like to see Blizzard do to improve World of Warcraft, but I very much doubt they're going to go that route. And that's the return to basics route. Like strip all that excess crap out that they've.
Well, they've shown they can't do that because they changed WoW Classic to have paid transactions.
Exactly.
I think it's just that Bobby now controls it. That's the reality that they're dealing with now. Bobby is in charge, and there's no getting away from it at this point. Their concerns are now nothing to do with the game. And what can you do at that point? So anyway, I don't know, like, I think we finished Endwalker after we went on break, did we? Well, I did, I think.
You were halfway through Endwalker when we did Rantathon, because we were equidistant from each other in terms of amount finished. And I just got to the end when we did Rantathon.
Right. I don't know. At any rate, I can't talk about it in particular, because Fern hasn't done it and there's no way I'm going to spoil it for him, other than to say that I really enjoyed it. I had a great time with it. The content is all really great. The dungeons are all really great. The story beats are pretty good, generally speaking. I feel like I diverge a little bit from the general population because most of the population seems to say best yet. I can't articulate it yet. I'd have to I might even play through the storylines again once I get the chance, because I can't quite articulate it even to myself, but I feel in my gut like there was something about Shadowbringers that I liked better.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
I think that it was just something more personal about the story.
Yeah, Shadowbringers,
because of your involvement as a character, as the Warrior of Light, is less sort of articulated and laid out for you in more freeform. Like, you are doing the things that you want because you want to do them, not fulfilling a great destiny. And I feel like what they put you through in Shadowbringers is more personal. Like, without spoiling it, a lot of the drama comes from things that you as your character have to endure and push forward through, despite the fact that all of the people surrounding you who desperately want to help and support you just can't, because there is no way for them to do so. And all they can do is watch you and hope that you can pull through.
Yeah, they also, in Shadowbringers, give a lot of the supporting cast a lot of screen time and spread that screen time out so that they're with you through the whole journey through it, so they feel a whole lot closer connected to the player.
A lot of them also get a good bit of emotional screen time as well. Like Alisei particularly, but everyone gets some degree.
They still get that in Endwalker, but I feel like Endwalker serves a different and counterbalancing purpose to Shadowbringers, because I feel like Shadowbringers, in a sense, is sort of the end of the Warrior of Light's character arc, and you enter. I feel, and this is all gut feelings. I haven't really explored analysing the narrative to establish this in any concrete way, but I feel like the narrative arc for the Warrior of Light completes in Shadowbringers. Like, the person you become through the course of those events is the person who will save the world at the end of Endwalker. Spoilers, you save the world at the end of Endwalker. Is that really spoilers?
Is that really a
spoiler? You save the world at the end of Endwalker. But you're the same person. You don't go through any more character development. But what Endwalker does is it serves to tie up the stories of all the people who walked with you. The resolve that you find to win at the end of Shadowbringers is the resolve that is sort of like polished up to a shine throughout Endwalker up to the climax. And I feel like Endwalker is not your story. Endwalker is watching you see all of your companions reach their fullest potential. So I liked Shadowbringers in the sense that it was more personal, because it's your experience, your very personal experience, which is why they give you a companion who sticks with you throughout, who can't interact with you in any way. Because you know that you need somebody who can see things from your perspective, who can see from the inside what it's like to be the Warrior of Light, where none of your companions are capable of doing that. And that is a plot point that is pointed out in specific a lot of times, both in Shadowbringers and in Endwalker, that they can't properly all the way empathize with you because you're something on a tier above them. And the battles that you have to fight are just of a level that they can't help as much as they desperately want to. So I feel like Endwalker and Shadowbringers are two completely different stories rather than one story which naturally leads into another story that just completes the same arc. I think Shadowbringers is your story and Endwalker is the rest of Eorzea's story and the rest of the Scion's story. And you are obviously the linchpin of all that around which events will turn, but the events turn around you and you watch them go around and you just drive the viewpoint. But that's just a feeling that I've got. Once Fern's had the time to really go through that story and form some opinions and thoughts on what happened, then maybe we can discuss it more fully. But in the most abstract terms, that's how I feel about them.
All right. We shall see then.
Right.
Yeah, I just need a lot of time to sit down and do it.
Which is not to say that I thought Endwalker was bad. Like, the content is just great, the story is great. There are some things that I think could have been deployed slightly better. There's a lot of criticisms that I've seen out there that I think are... I feel like most of the criticisms that I've seen, like specific criticisms of the Endwalker story, particularly in the way the main scenario resolves, they're not really about the story, they're about the person viewing the story. Like, they view it in that particular way because of who they are, not because of anything the story really did. Like, there's some things that can't sympathize, but like, the final dialogue exchange with the last enemy that you fight in Endwalker, Aristeel, that's been a huge point of contention for some players. They feel like, oh no, there should have been a lengthy discourse between those two characters.
Well, it doesn't really fit that moment in time, though.
But I think that depends on... Yeah, that's true. But a lot of people really felt like that was the way it should have been structured. They should have accommodated that. There should have been a lengthy interchange, and then, you know, you extract some greater meaning from it. And that a lot of people felt like it was purely a meta moment. But I don't think that that's the case at all, because that's not who I viewed the Warrior of Light that I was playing to be. And I think that a lot of cases, people's dissatisfaction with the way that it was played out was more their dissatisfaction with who they are as a person than actually with the story. Like, they interpreted it as a particular way because they feel a certain lack that is actually them being seen and called out by the game in some ways. Like, I think that the reason they feel it is meta is because they don't like what that meta says about them.
Yeah. I think I know specifically the part of that initial lead up to the fight you're talking about.
Yeah, like, because I didn't hesitate, really. I picked the top option, and I got the smirk, the very reminiscent smirk that you see earlier in the story.
Yeah,
On your character. Because that's who I felt was the correct thing. Because of the way you enter the story, right? You enter the story in A Realm Reborn, riding on the carriage, and you're an adventurer who's off to seek your fortune. That's who you are, and that's the foundation of who you become, ultimately. And everything else is just window dressing, and I think that in that sense, the opponent is the reflection that it is being projected that he is, and it works. It works for me, but a lot of people just see, oh no, this is just a meta commentary on the way people play video games. No, I don't think that's the case at all.
It came off to me as not a mirror image, but this is the type of person that somebody like the Warrior of Light could have become if they didn't have friends.
Yeah, that's the point. I think that's the thematic point that the writers are driving at, and it's what a lot of people don't see it, and I think it's because they take a very shallow view of the world generally. They don't think that you can have a both and. They want to live in a heroic world and play a purely heroic character because they don't see heroism as a real thing in the world. I think that this is like a modernist's deficit of values, that they think, oh well, we're just meat. in the real world, and so I want to live in a fantasy world and participate in a fantasy story where people aren't just meat. But if you don't believe that people are just meat, if you do believe that values and heroism are things that are real in the real world and have real weight and real meaning, then a story like this isn't a fantasy escape. It's an exploration of the way people really are. So I think that those sort of pivotal final moments, they actually work. But I think that a lot of the criticism is based on who you are. Like if you are not capable of seeing the world in that way because of your sort of metaphysical take on the world, it's going to ring kind of hollow, because it will resonate with sort of like the pointlessness of life that you think is the state of being, as opposed to being part of the story. Because you know, if you do believe that in things that are of eternal value, like values, like ideals, like if you think that there are any that are actually good as opposed to everything being matter, then Eorzea is not an implausible world.
Well, it's talking about that moment in that cutscene specifically. It almost seems like the natural reaction the Warrior Light as a character separate from the player would have, as an acknowledgement of they haven't forgot who they truly are at this and what originally motivated them.
Because I think that if the Warrior of Light is only the Warrior of Light, then you've just become sort of like an artifact in a machine, really.
Yeah.
And like being someone who has no aspect to their existence other than I want to help people and defend Eorzea. There have been several times in the story where you have the opportunity to denounce that point of view as being shallow. And the idea that people feel bushwhacked by it at the very end is, when you have that option at the very end, is just, I think that they want that additional exploration because they want to excuse that strain of thinking that both the antagonist and the protagonist in that scenario have.
Yeah.
When I don't think that's really necessary. I think that this is part of the way the Warrior of Light plays out in the Warrior of Light's world, as well as, like, you can say that there's meta commentary if you want, and it's quite easy to make that argument, but it's not only meta commentary, which is what I've seen criticism has been labeled.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of that. I've seen a little bit of that going on the Reddit, and it didn't ring for me at all. But also, I love dumb, cheesy garbage, like that entire scene and the fight afterwards.
Oh yeah, everything about it is just great. Especially, like, couldn't help but wonder. I sat there and thought about, what does the scene feel like if you've been a day one Lalafell player? Like, are you just, because you're a tiny man who is in for a penny, in for a pound with being a Lala in the world, and there's something about that scene just has to look ridiculous as a Lala. But if you're totally buying into it, like, what does that feel like?
World's bravest potato.
Yeah, that's a potato exclusive feeling that we ain't gonna get.
Yeah,
it's one of those scenes where the advice I will give you, Fern, because I've been trying to simultaneously keep this so oblique that you can't get any specifics out of it, as well as wetting your whistle enough to want to know what we're talking about. The advice that I would give you before you go into what will be very obvious to you is the final big boss fight, is make sure that your glamour is on point.
Also, set aside an extra 30 minutes after the last trial.
Yeah, don't go straight to bed. You're not going to have time to go straight to bed. It's not one trial and then I'll log off and I'll finish the epilogue later. No, it's going to keep going.
okay.
But make sure your glamour is on point first, because the dramatic scenes will not be dramatic if you're wearing the chocobo head, or they will be dramatic in a totally different way.
I mean, that whole scene is hammy as all get out, and having the Warrior Light show up in a chocobo head might fit it just fine.
I mean, yeah, there's been a few times like that.
Yeah, like, I'm glad that I was wearing an outfit I was satisfied with, instead of, because oftentimes when I play an expansion, I won't bother with glamour until I'm at max level and finish the story, because your gear changes constantly.
Yeah.
And in a lot of games, there was a hefty cost to constantly applying transmog.
I wonder if that's why they give you the gear at level 89 for the artifact gear, or 89.
I think that's part of it. Yeah, they want you to be able to look the part for the drama that's to come.
Yeah, because I had that gear, but it looked ugly. So I glamored it to the older astrology and gear, but most of the classes look fine and it'll work okay in that scene.
Well, I mean, I actually really appreciate class sets generally. Like, I hate almost all the warrior ones. I don't use them, but I appreciate that class sets are there because it gives you it gives you not just one, but a selection of very thematically appropriate costumes for that job. If you're not somebody who's spent a huge amount of time designing and hunting glamours, which I'm not, I'm really not. I would like to be, but I have a million things that I'd like to do in this game on my slate, and that's just one of them, which I touch now and again. But yeah, I was wearing the Fending set from the Final Eden tier, which is one of my favorite outfits in the game. I think it's a really cool tanking outfit that I think works really well on really slender characters like female Makote, because a lot of the plate just looks a bit silly on them. Because I've completed the glamour sets for Fending for first tier of Eden and last tier of Eden. First tier of Eden is very classic paladin plate, but when you wear it on a very skinny, short female Makote, and this probably applies even more so to Aura, since the females are even more slender and short, you look like you're drowning in plate. Like you're just trying to barely keep your head above the plates that are trying to claim you. But the third tier one looks like a proper outfit. Like, it looks like plate armor, but it's sort of like fitted very well in a way that you could never do with real plate armor. So it actually looks like a proper outfit on a slender character without looking like it's attempting to eat you, the way some plate sets do, bulkier plate sets.
Yeah. I've been having some interesting mixes with the Barakat. Like, you either get pieces of costume that just look too small or too big. Like, Eden 2 armor set for a machinist has the world's most popped collar.
Some people really like the popped collars, though.
I do, but it's like peripheral vision is for chumps in this case. So make sure you choose a glamour that you think will look really cool and fitting and dramatic on your character for the final sort of dramatic showdowns, because there'll be a lot of cutscenes with action and stuff your character will be participating in, and you want to make sure that your glamour game is on point. I'm actually going to be able to apply a hairstyle too. By that time,
if there will be close-ups of your character, a lot in the big dramatic cutscenes, and you will...
So if you have rape face, use a Fantasia.
No, I fixed that already, thankfully. I ran into that problem at the end of Realm Reborn, but Barakat, you don't have any choice for hairstyles. You got the one that matches your face, and that's it currently. But thankfully,
it was a rigging issue apparently.
Yeah, so thankfully they're going back and fixing that. As well as for female Viera.
Yeah, they're going to do that by degrees. They got it right with Bunny Boys to start with, though, after they realised the catastrophe that was the new races for Shadowbringers. So
I haven't actually looked. Did they? Does it fix the hat issue as well?
I think the hat is a bit lower down the list.
Yeah.
But the getting hairstyles, like, they've implemented some additional hairstyles for Viera, I think. But they're going to work on a better, sort of more permanent rigging fix, and they have basically resolved, okay, so we know now this is a big mistake, let's not make it again, type of thing. But so I enjoyed Endbringers right the way to the end. My only regret is that I just don't have the sort of time to get good enough to do the extreme versions of the fights, because the fights are great and they're even better in their extreme and savage versions. I haven't participated in the raid at all yet. I'll get round to it. I'm not in a big hurry though, because there's no percentage in being a big hurry if you're not like a bleeding edge clearer in FF. That's my feeling anyway. It's better to take your time and enjoy yourself as much as possible.
Yeah, if we're doing the raid mostly to see the story, which I think we all are, and maybe get a little bit of gear out of there, but we don't have a reason to push the really big numbers in this game.
Yeah, but the one thing that I regret though is that there's a lot of cool fights that you just don't see if you never do Savage. So,
yeah, but
I mean, I'm perfectly all right with that from a design philosophy perspective though. Like, I think that it's right for the harder one to have the cool final phase. that's something that I brought across from WoW in terms of way of thinking. Like, I think that that's perfectly all right. It's just that there are a few situations where it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like the most egregious one that I've seen so far is the end of Eden raids, where it doesn't actually make a lot of sense if you don't see the final phase. The way characters reappear in the story. Because it's also spoilers for Fern, so I won't talk about it too much.
Yeah, I've still got to finish Eden too.
But there's a certain character who plays a much, much larger role in the final fight of Eden in Savage than they do in normal, where they basically don't appear until the story kicks back in. And so it ends up looking a little bit stop and start. It's like, oh, this character wasn't here and now suddenly they are. But yeah, so I like those though, and I like how there's like extra phases at the end of it. I think every tier has that. So for Omega, I think like the final there's an extra big grotesque form for whatchamacallit, the tree guy.
Oh, the tree guy.
Tree guy, yeah.
I can't remember his name.
Savage Kefka, basically.
Yeah, Savage Kefka has an entire, like, this basically the final phase is an entire separate fight.
Yeah.
And the real challenge to clearing Savage is that you have to do 2 massively complicated boss fights back to back.
Yeah, like Kefka's the big example. You do regular Kefka and then you do like final phase ultimate form Kefka. Savage.
Yeah, the Wingerling Kefka is what I
Wingerling
call
Kefka.
it in my brain.
Thankfully, you don't need to climb the weird angel tree.
Yeah, but so there's Wingerling Kefka on the second tier. There's a big sort of Eldritch Abomination version of Tree Dude on the first tier, and there's like the version of Omega that's sort of more reminiscent of classic Final Fantasy, where he's sort of like a big, huge, monstrous centaur thing, sort of a bit like Ultima is in most Final Fantasies, including 14. And so in Eden, you've got a similar thing where in the first tier you have to fight another version of Titan, like even bigger Titan,
really big Titan.
With yet another Under the Weight remix.
Nice.
And on the second tier, you have like the full version of the Shiva fight, where you've got sort of blending in the Hraesvelga part of her legend is in there as well. And
yes,
in the final one,
scarf.
Yeah, and in the final one, I'm not going to say anything because it's too integral to the story. But yeah, so I wish that I would get to see those, but I can just watch them on YouTube. That's what I'm going to have to do. I think that it's reasonable to have to commit to doing all of that practice in order to see those fights, and they are hideously difficult. You need to be pixel perfect.
The raw amount of time needed to invest in that kind of thing, I don't have that time on my best week.
Yeah, like when we were in college, maybe, but we've got things to do now.
We have 2 adults.
Yeah, like I resigned from WoW Mythic raiding for that reason. It's like I have a job now. I just can't commit that time because it would if I wanted to continue Mythic raiding while employed, it would take every scrap of my time. Especially the way World of Warcraft Mythic raiding was, where all of the time that you are not raiding, you have to be farming for consumables.
Yes.
So how about instead of that? No. Anyway, so Endwalker, great. Play it if you can beat the Q boss. So I went back to work after a couple of days off. I think like in total, if you count it all up, I managed to scrape like 5 days off, which is pretty damn good in my books, because it's very rare that they allow me more than 1 day off, ever. But one of the days that I went back to work, they decided to bring the servers down for maintenance. And on the same day, they brought the FGO servers down for maintenance, and I didn't know what to do because I've been bouncing between FGO and Final Fantasy pretty much as my staple gaming. So I had to go and find something else to do. So I picked up my Switch and went back to playing Monster Hunter Stories 2, because that's basically the way I've been getting through the Q boss, is that I will in queue and then I'll play FGO or I'll play my Switch. So I'm still making progress, but it has become very slow progress because I cannot sodding find the monsters that I want. This has proven to be a huge burden in the end game,
Yeah.
of Monster Hunter Stories 2 is that you just can't find high rank monsters sometimes. My suspicion is that all of the ones that I'm missing are in sort of like the deep bowels of the Elder's Lair. And I
Sadly,
just haven't
likely.
I haven't made it far enough through there to see a lot of them yet. So I'm stuck with like oddball things. Like what I'm currently desperate for is higher rank Desert Celtis Queen because I need the parts. But I haven't been able to find one in the overworld anywhere, and I've spent hours looking. So it's definitely in the Elder's Lair or in multiplayer dungeons, which limited access. And I understand the grindiness of Monster Hunter. I understand the way that the admissions to those stages are supposed to work, but it's frustrating to me, especially considering how much actual currency, in-game currency. I mean, I'm not saying that it's pay to win. How much in-game currency you've got to shell out if you just want to grind those things, because there's a limit to how many of those things you get. If you get unlucky, and I'm always unlucky, you won't get your tickets refunded. So it's not very easy to farm a lot of that stuff, and I don't even know how you're supposed to get tickets for Elder Dragons unless you just pump in tons of time farming up bottle caps. That seems to be the only way to do it.
It does. I think there is another way. Hang on, no.
No, there's like a couple of tchotchkes that you get
Yeah.
as quest rewards, but that's it. Once those are gone, it's bottle caps or go home.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just have to grit my teeth and do it. The thing is that that's a really time-consuming thing to do, and I have lots of time-consuming games to play because I'm the sort of person who tends to gravitate towards stuff that will just let me grind on autopilot if necessary. Which, you know, I can do that in Monster Hunter Stories too, but I can also do that in Final Fantasy, and I can also do that in FGO. So I have 3 time vampires vying for my free time. But yeah, I still really enjoy Monster Hunter Stories 2. There's a lot of content that I haven't done, like I haven't fought any of the Elder Dragons. I haven't fought some of the Deviants. I have managed to defeat other Deviants. Which ones have I defeated? I've defeated the really, really meanie pants Tigrex, and I've defeated Silverwind Nagakuga, and I've defeated Dread Queen Rathian, and I've defeated Bloodbath Diablos. That's as far as I've made it.
Yeah.
They are not friendly customers, but I think most people seem to struggle the most with Bloodbath. But the one that I had the most trouble with was Grimclaw Tigrex, because he just takes turn after turn after turn after turn, and he can just kill you if you don't have your tenacity. He can just decide he doesn't like you anymore and erase you. You need to be at 3 hearts all the time. It doesn't matter what your plans were up until this point. If you lose a heart, restore it. Drop everything you're doing and restore it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Nagakuga I found wasn't.
Yeah.
I haven't tried the others. I did try Hellblade Glavenus at one point, and that ended poorly.
I haven't tried the Fated 4 yet. That's on the list of things to do, along with so many other things in so many games. I've got the quest to fight Kieran, but I haven't been brave enough to do it yet, because Kieran historically has been a bugbear of mine. Because it's a small, fast target that appears to be able to electrocute you from anywhere, it feels like.
Yeah.
It's basically Kieran in a nutshell. I'm also amped for Sunbreak, but I'm also dreading Sunbreak because somehow I'm going to have to fit it in my schedule.
I'm going to have to make them. Maybe the Q boss is working my advantage in that case.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as Sunbreak is concerned, like, this is less bad than when I was raiding in WoW. Because once you're raiding in WoW, that's a commitment. You can't drop it for anything. There's no way out. You're just going to be suffocated by that monster. So now, FF doesn't pressure me. I'm not got savage commitments. I'm not on a static or anything. I mean, I'm sure that I could join one if I wanted, but I don't want to put all of my eggs in that one basket. So I can just stop playing FF for a while and play Sunbreak when it comes out.
And it's not like we don't have stuff to do that's backlogged. Like, every time we get more than one of us on, we always are checking something off the checklist. Like, today we did half of Alexander.
Yeah, and that's a cool fight with some cool fights with some cool environments. I wish that they had, much like Aba was saying, I wish that they hadn't abdicated on the the environments thing to the extent that they have. But I guess there's not really much to be done about that at this point. The development resources are going to good things, so yeah. I guess I haven't done any of Asphodelos, so I don't know if they are still doing the arena thing, and I haven't watched any videos of it either. But they probably are, I expect, because that's basically what Zodiac looked like. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't think that's a spoiler.
can-
Everybody knew you were going to fight Zodiac, so
Yeah.
I mean, they've only been building up for goodness knows how long.
Since like
But
early stages of Realm Reborn, I think. It's mentioned.
yeah, but the way in which Zodiac makes his appearance in the story, well, you've got a ride for you. You were always going to fight him. You're always going to fight him, but boy, did not expect to fight him like that. Absolutely did not expect it. Like, Zodiac is something that you envision as being entirely different to what actually happens.
Continuing this conversation, train will lead us straight to Spoiler Town.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is heading directly there.
Well, I'm not heading in that direction. I'm trying to sort of toe the line as much as possible to wind Fern up so that he plays it.
Man, just need time. All you're doing is making me want to do something I can't do.
If you log on, about right now is when the queues start to really go down.
Yeah. I'll give
And
it
they'll be
another
down.
couple of hours and then I should be able to log in fairly quickly.
It's the previous 5 hours before this one every day where it's really, really bad.
Yeah, the mornings for me, basically.
Right, so I have two more stops. FGO, not much to say because it's New Year's. So there are New Year's events. So I did the GSSR because, you know, I always throw money into FGO at GSSRs because this is my primary way to support the franchise. Although I'm pretty dubious about some of the stuff that's been happening in the way FGO is being run, but we'll wait and see. It hasn't actually jumped the shark yet, so I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. But at any rate, so I did GSSR. I agonised at great length over which banner to roll on, but eventually I chose Extra 2 and I got Okita Alta, which I consider to be the perfectly neutral result. There were some results I would have been unhappy with and some that I've been really happy with. I got the perfectly neutral result, so I'm okay with that. And she's been growing on me since I've been using her. So
Anything that isn't Charizard is not a booby prize.
But the Okita Alta is sort of an odd duck being an alter ego, but I didn't have a strong farming alter ego. My farming alter ego was Passion Lip, who's really farming incompatible and has a really wonky kit, and also a Taunt, which is not really what you expect in a farmer. But at any rate, Okita Alta at NP1 doesn't do a great deal of damage. She's got some really powerful steroids, and she's got a couple of upcoming strengthening quests, so she will improve over time. And now I've got sort of like an incentive to throw tickets at her banners when they pass by, because I'm in this sort of place where NP1 servants at this point are almost a disappointment, because I would rather have NP2 on one that I already have and really like, so that I've got a better reason to use them more often. And so Okita Alta is sort of falling into that camp now. Okita Alta is officially a better Saber than her Saber Alta, being the original Okita, because Okita Alta shoots beams, and everyone knows in order to be a good Saber you have to be able to shoot a beam.
It's mandatory.
Every good Saber can shoot beams. But yeah, and Okita Alta definitely shoots a beam. She's like 3rd gen NP design, so she's got a really cool animation which has like the cut-in close-up thing. Yeah, but FGO is currently in the Enmate rerun, which I am proceeding through apace, because I've got a ton of CEs left over from last time, and plus I got a bunch more this time, failing to roll up a second copy of Benny Enma, failing miserably. But I conserved quartz. I think I kept 12 10 pulls worth of quartz in reserve without using it, because I want to basically throw tickets recklessly all year at whatever is interesting to me and not spend quartz generally, because what I'm hoping for is to roll up Castoria when she comes out, because while I'm not necessarily a huge fan of her and I don't necessarily like the way the meta is constructed. I also hate being locked out of the meta, because I don't want to spend a huge amount of my real world time farming if possible, and looping helps ease that. And I didn't want to go all in for a Dante's loop because, well, with my luck, getting NP2 Dante's would be out of reach, basically. I'd have to get incredibly lucky. Whereas with Castoria, one Castoria will enable looping on tons of servants. So that seems like the way to go. So if I hoard all my quartz all year, maybe I'll have a modicum of chance to roll her up when she rolls around in like August or wherever it is. And I can just use tickets to roll on, mood banners. The last thing is last night I watched the second Camelot movie at Bob's. Bob's Honest Bob's
Honest Bob's
anime
discount internet.
Yeah, discount anime outlet.
Yes.
But now the subs are awful that are available at the moment because this has just dropped. But the subs are deeply, deeply awful. Like they barely qualify as English. So you'll have to scratch around for whatever knowledge you have from context about what's supposed to happen in the story, and whatever bits and pieces of Japanese that you've picked up through osmosis in order to understand what's going on, because the subs are unspeakably awful. However, the story is also pretty awful. Like Camelot is a great singularity and would make a good, properly paced series, but as a movie, I got feeling like Unlimited Blade Works movie, but not quite so bad because it's part 2 rather than a whole movie. In the sense that it feels like a series of largely fan service oriented fights rather than really trying to do the whole story justice the way Babylonia did. Like Babylonia's got some real pacing problems and really rushes toward the end. And this movie has a little bit of pacing problems and rushes a little bit at the end, but mostly it comes off like, well, there's all these big fights that are going down and we're just going to show them off the maximum that we can. And you can tell that that was the ethos which they attacked the project from, because all of the fights have been given to different designers, it looks like. They all look like they're animated and directed a little bit differently. So you get radically different types of fights. Like you get some of the more classic ones, and you even get one in there like Lancelot versus Agravain looks an awful lot like the fights in Apocrypha. That very sort of fluid and sketchy style that some people really like and some people really hate. It seems to be a real polarizing style. Yeah, so each fight has its different look, and they do the fights really well. It's not the thing that I don't want to have to say it, but it's the only thing that you can really say is that it's not as good as if UFO Table had done it. It's just not, because they are masters of their craft, and everybody else does a good enough job. But they still do a good enough job, and they manage to pack a lot of weight into each fight and each scene, even if it's not quite the same way that it happens in the Camelot Singularity in the FGO game. It still resolves okay. Lots of story beats are skipped. A lot of stuff is merged. Like the Trihermes is something that exists in Ozymandias' palace now. It's not. They don't have to wander out in the desert to find Atlas. He's just built his palace on top of it. So he has it at his beck and call, and it's sort of implied that that's his motivation for taking the course of action that he has, is that he's got access to everything that Trihermes can tell you, and he's decided that sitting on his duff and doing nothing is the best route. Of course, he thaws out of that because of protagonist therapy, but yeah. The fights play out really well. They're quite good. Ozymandias fights using the power of pure ego, basically. The only man who can stand toe-to-toe with Gilgamesh on raw ego. And he fights with the power of ego. As far as I can tell, he actually powers his super space cannon thing using ego.
Jeez.
But, yeah, and so he gets his time to shine. And he's the one who uses his big cannon to open the gates of the Holy City instead of having Sanzang do it and then exit stage left immediately. Instead, Sanzang goes toe-to-toe with Mordred and they have their own fight.
Oh, good. So she actually gets some time in the spotlight.
Yeah. And I guess Mordred acquires yet another adoptive parent.
Yeah, another one.
Because in the end, like Sanzang is comforting her at the end when they both disappear and so on. But so Lancelot fights Agravain and they have a really wonky looking fight, which never comes to a conclusion on screen because that's part of the way it was originally written. There's a big fight between the Hassan of the Cursed Arm, Hassan of Serenity, and Tristan, and it plays out much more like you would expect a fight between Hassans and a knight to go, where the knight is basically attempting to engage directly, and the two Hassans are both attempting to engage indirectly, and so that's played out much more similarly to the way that the Hassans fight in the likes of Heaven's Feel and those interpretations, whereas what you see in FGO, of course, is the very simplified combat where everybody just brute forces everyone else. So the fight goes where they're using a lot of throwing daggers, wires, and poison in that, attempting to stay out of the way while bringing down Tristan indirectly, which comes a cropper, of course, because they're totally outclassed. But yeah, at any rate, and the sort of the big fight is between Gawain and Bedivere, which basically it starts off as a knightly fight and then devolves into a slugfest where they're basically trying to fight with whatever they've got available. One running theme in the fights is that most of the knights lose their weapon at some point and end up basically brawling with their opponent sooner or later. And so you've got a big fight where you have the original Buster Gorilla fighting against Bedivere, and they get down to the point where they're beating each other with rocks and fists because there's just nothing else. But the final engagement with the Lion King is kind of a disappointment, I guess. But it sort of, there's not really a good way to do it.
Yeah.
I feel like they were pretty much painted into a corner by that. So it resolves in a way that in context is satisfying, but is unsatisfying because you know that, a UFO table would have done something way more spectacular.
Yeah.
And
also, I didn't know the GSSR was 15 St. Quartz, so I pulled on it.
Yeah. You got what?
Got Abby. Another copy of Abby.
Yeah, I probably would have been happy with Abby as well, but because Abby is incredibly useful for Berserker bosses, where there's not really a good solution to them, because if they get a turn, you die if you're using something other than a foreigner. But
and Abby's the best Berserker squisher.
Yeah, by far, not even close. Although there's going to be Mysterious Idol X Alter is going to come out before too long. But yeah, so the story resolves adequately, but I think the biggest damp squib, I think, was that the interpretation of Lord Camelot is way inferior to the one in Babylonia. It just doesn't have the sort of weight and drama, and it should have had more weight and drama since it's sort of the first big scene where MASH will use it on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not. It does play a role. It plays instead of playing the dramatic combat role that you might expect based on the way it played out in the VN, I suppose you could call it, is that it plays a narrative role in that it seems to catalyze conjuring actual Camelot sort of thing in a way that allows a story beat to take place in the environs where it's a callback to who the Lion King used to be, rather than sort of the dramatic noble phantasm interpretation that is most commonly applied. So it does serve a narrative role instead, but it's not quite what I expected. Which doesn't necessarily mean it's strictly worse, but it's not what I expected. But I think that the show stealer fight ultimately is MASH versus Lancelot, because it's basically Galahad working out his frustrations with his dad through MASH. And Mesh is such a soft-spoken character most of the time that the VA doesn't really get to strut her stuff, but that is completely suspended for the duration of this fight, and basically Mesh gives Lancelot a unilateral physical and verbal beatdown for the entire fight. Absolutely thrashes him. And that's, I think, the most memorable fight, because you just don't get to see Mesh lose her rag very often. And she does in that scene. It's a great little scrap. And you do not typically envision a shield being used quite in that way. she at no point manifests or draws her sword as usual. So yeah, it's just shield beatdowns all the way. Anyway, I'll call it a close there because I've been talking for an ungainly amount of time.
Yep, we should
Okey-doke.
actually take a break.
Here's a
And
break,
then we can
folks.
discuss.
We will be right back after some music. And we're back.
else.
Yes, indeed.
I have no idea what I'm actually doing in this dungeon. I am lost.
So we were at the end of Vol's weeks, plural, I think.
Yes. The only other thing I have to say is that Nita Kreese is completely adorable throughout the entire movie because she's basically incapable of not being completely adorable.
Well, yes. She is the best Grand Wizard. Alrighty. I have finally got around to playing some games some people might be interested in hearing the opinions of.
Right.
Now, I have a history with both the series I'm going to talk about. Well, yeah. So we'll do these two first because they're going to take the longest. And that is SMT5 and the Tales series. My weeks themselves aren't very interesting. It was a whole lot of family stuff with Christmas, but nothing significant happened other than my family begging me, please don't start anything.
You have a reputation.
I do. I am quite proud of that reputation at this point. And so I was begged by my dad and the opossum, please don't start anything at family dinner. I tried so hard to bait people. I all right, I won't start it, but I'll bait you.
I won't start it, but I'm definitely going to finish it.
That sounds like I'm not going to start it, but I'm going to start it.
It's like, I'm not going to start it, but I'm going to leave the flint and tinder right in the open and see if anybody takes it.
Like leaving a big red button on the table saying, press me.
And unfortunately, the bites they did take were for the lighter stuff. Like, I don't want to really get into it, but my plans failed, and I could not start anything. So Christmas and New Year's were unfortunately peaceful, despite my best efforts. And a lot of
consider that a good thing.
A lot of Christmas time was spent just with family doing family stuff.
He's earned it. In previous years, he's had to be the one to break up fist fights.
Oh yeah, that's true. So at this point, I just it's boring if something exciting doesn't happen. So getting people to argue with each other is just a way to spice things up a little bit, and also to tick off a whole lot of people that are crazy libtards in my family on the opossum's wife's side, who are permanent residents now of the greater family structure. So yeah. There was a lot of work that was happening, but it crippled me for an entire week where I just disappeared. And I was just gone because I had too much to do. That post-New Year's, everybody's out back from the holidays rush hit me way too hard. And I had to just stop and disappear for a bit to deal with that. So that's why I dipped from the internet for about a week. And all I would do is come home and play either SMT or Tales, whatever I was on at the time, for a few hours and go straight to bed, because I couldn't process anything that required a whole lot of brain work.
You could not brain.
Yeah. So first we'll do SMT5 of the two single player games I played. SMT5 is, I'll start with the positives of it. It is probably mechanically the best SMT game, mainline game that's been released, period. In terms of how it plays and the number of demons you can collect and just the quality of life changes they made. Like, demons can't jack your stuff after you've bribed them. If you bribe them enough, they will eventually join you. Because all that made you do before was reload your save. Nobody's gonna just say, oh, well, I guess that Soma's just gone.
Yeah.
So stuff like that.
That's, I think, a good thing to keep in mind for developers. Is like, if you have a mechanic that is just going to make literally everybody save scum, it's probably a bad mechanic.
Yeah. The raw number of demons is through the roof in this one. Most of the classics have returned, and a lot of the new faces. All the new faces we've saw, barring the national defense deities for Japan from SMT4, seem to have come back. And the weird 3D thing they had for one of the bosses that replaced I forget who he replaced, but he's not back. And there's a handful of new demons, not too many. The series creeps them in with every installment, even the spin-offs, and they just become mainstays over time. So new demons are not a selling point for an SMT game. But
I don't think we need tumor arm Michael Jackson becoming a mainstream
no,
design.
Lucifer's had got his old design back as the gray version for the Heliel form, and he has a new version for his angel form that looks like a robot, and as usual with Lucifer redesigns, looks really dumb. But it's not anywhere close to as bad as tumor arm Michael Jackson.
But it should look like a robot. I think that it's been a defect that it didn't. Because all of the angels look like robots except for him in previous incarnations.
Yeah.
Like that was sort of, I thought the principle was, oh well, this is because they all originate from the Law faction, so making them mechanical in nature sort of makes thematic sense. But if he's from that faction, why does he suddenly not look like any of them, even if he's a rebel?
They've been slowly changing more and more the angels to have more robotic designs. Classic Angel isn't in BDSM gear anymore and has a weird mask thing. Instead, and just looks like an androgynous person with a full head mask. But I'll find you a picture of. Here it is.
Oh, as long as it's not a gimp suit anymore.
Yeah, no. Here's new Lucifer. And for his super angel form, and I'll try and find tumor arm Lucifer for compare and contrast here, so that you can, because I don't think people quite understand just how bad this was unless I show them. Ah, yes, here we are.
I mean, that looks a little bit wonky, but it's more like what I envision him to look like for SMT.
Yeah, that's what we were working with in SMT4. This design was received so poorly that they tried to touch it up for Apocalypse, and that they gave him a throne to sit on and changed his skin color.
You know, I'm just thinking about it. That looks a lot. The Michael Jackson design, like it has some reminiscence to what Aleister Crowley claimed the demon that dictated to him his writings looked like.
Maybe. I don't know that particular part of lore there with Crowley's stuff in real life.
I don't know much about it either. It's just something that I've heard. And what specifically I heard is that basically everybody concludes that he's describing grey aliens.
So
that guy kind of looks like a grey alien, so...
Yeah. Oh, it has a phase 2 that looks even more disturbing. That's phase 2.
Oh boy. What is that on its arm? Is that a tumor baby?
It's the tumor. It's the tumor baby.
It's a tumor baby.
Yeah.
Have they turfed that guy out of doing any more design work?
Yeah, he's been fired. And they've got new designers on the team now to make the new demons. So yeah, Lucifer's change overall. You can't go any further down than Michael Jackson with the tumor arm. So anything's better than that. But they did okay with Lucy's new Super Angel form, and they kept his classic form in the game as his weaker form. So you still get the full angel. I don't think I can post that one. I think even though he doesn't have anything down there, it's still technically an SFW.
Yeah, YouTube still tends to frown on that sort of thing.
So
did the snaky poster girl lady have a horrific second form?
Nua, she has yes, she has 3 forms. She has her human form, that's her weakest form. She has her snake transform form, where she looks like basically an anime beat monster girl. And then she has the uber monstrous form if you fight her, and she's one of the antagonists of the Indians, because she's part of a duo that is our neutral route representative, because we have neutral route reps now. So I don't want to touch the story yet. I want to do that last. The gameplay works pretty much like classic SMT with a few twists that just make it much better to play. The first thing they did is they fixed this since original SMT4, but they've expanded on it. Light and dark skills now only have a chance to insta-kill a target if that target is weak to it. And otherwise they are treated as just another damage type that costs more mana. Or more MP. The other things they've done is they've added a 4th tier of spells so that you can keep progressing your spell lists on your demons and your protagonist. And that before it was, you would get your Agi, your Agalios, your Agidines, and that was it. And then you would get into the special spells. Now there's a 4th tier in between Dine and the special spells like Trisagion. It's called Barian, so you have Agibarian, Mudobarian, and this deals severe damage, but doesn't have any of the special effects of the big spells like Trisagion or Ice Age. And this just makes for a much better curve going into the late game when you can get your Dine spells around, the later part of the halfway mark, and then work into the Barians as you go through the end game, instead of getting your Dines at a little after the halfway point, and that's what you use forever until you at level 80 something, you finally unlock Ice Age and Trisagion. Or Killing Wind, or whatever your favorite one is for your preferred element. And they have changed it so that buffs operate similarly to the Persona series, but still have a SMT feel to them. It used to be buffs just straight didn't have a duration in the original SMTs. They eventually added a duration to them, but it was ludicrously long. Now they have, because they've acknowledged the fact that because buffs exist, they have to give Dekaja and Dekunda to literally every single enemy in the late game, that all your buffs will do is waste a turn, which, while still good, it takes a whole lot of resources and time to set up those buffs. They've only made the buffs last 2 turns.
Okay, that's a bit better.
So this plays a lot better than it sounds like it does, because it means getting your buffs stripped isn't that big of a deal. It just means you're accelerated a turn towards your disadvantaged turn. It does mess with prep work a little bit, but that's part of the boss fight. So you just kind of got to deal with that. And having to upkeep your buffs and debuffs is way more difficult in this game because of their absurd MP costs. Unless you're grinding with paid DLC, you ain't gonna have the MP to chain Luster Candies and Debilitates. Not that you'll want to cast Luster Candy anyway, because I'll get to that when we get towards after the good stuff. And overall, it feels better to play. Like they've gone through and pruned a lot of the status effect spells, or made them do damage in addition to doing a status effect. And they made bosses not immune to status effects, but show you what they're resistant to when you scan them. They have immunities to some, resistances to most, and have normal and can be affected normally by some of them. So statuses aren't completely useless, because nobody takes status moves in SMT because they don't work on bosses. But in this game, they do, sometimes. And there are some bosses that you really want status effects for in the late game and post game, because they get bosses that come at you with like 5 or more enemies on the field. Throwing an AoE charm out there can sometimes save your bacon. Even if all of them are resistant to it, you still could get lucky and charm one.
I presume you still can't just hammer a boss out of existence.
No, you can't hammer a boss out of existence. If the boss is weak to light or dark, it cannot be insta-killed.
Yeah.
So
that makes it too easy.
Then you have So demon recruitment works the same as before. You find the demon, you talk to it, you recruit it, and then you fuse it into something better. And this plays the whole way through the game just like the old SMTs, with very little changes. Occasionally, subquests now will have demons join you, and you can pick which one of 2 paths in some subquests to decide a specific demon you want. Although this affects your alignment, so keep that in mind. And then you have the protagonist, whose growth is different than most other protagonists. They have jacked the numbers on everybody up, but they have also given demons and the demons get 1 more stat point per level up, randomly assigned to one of the stats randomly, or to one that they naturally have growth in addition to the normal 2 they would get when they level up. and the protagonist gets a guaranteed 3 semi-randomized, it favors stats you have less points in, points every single level, and you're allowed to manually put an extra point in wherever you want. So it's a hybrid between having a static or randomized leveling curve and one you can plan out and weight yourself.
So you could still theoretically get horribly screwed.
With your bonus stats, yes. But what this means is you don't have to stop investing in magic to go and put points in endurance because you've been neglecting it and you're getting one shot. It just cuts out a whole lot.
There's a good chance that it's going to avoid letting you fall ridiculously far behind in that stat.
Yeah, the only stat I had to deviate from... I did a magic build. So the only stat I had to deviate dumping magic into was for agility, because my team wasn't going first on some of the trash. And as anybody that's played SMT knows, that's very dangerous.
Yeah, you can get smushed before you get a chance to do anything sometimes.
It's not you can get smushed, it's like eventually you will get smushed.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time.
You're playing a situation then where you're just going to have to save constantly.
Yeah, and thankfully you can save literally anywhere, pretty much. There's save points all over the place. So, like, every 10 feet it feels like there's a save point that also acts as your fast travel network.
Nice.
So, your protagonist learns skills by killing a specific demon, either in its boss fight or out in the open world, and it has a chance to drop its essence. And you can pick any of the skills that demon naturally learns and add them to your protagonist if he has the slots for it. Now, there's a trade-off here, and that you can also use these essences to teach skills to fuse demons that don't normally learn them naturally. So you don't have to go through a whole fusion chain to make sure no fizz is on everybody for the super boss or whatever. You can go like farm that particular demon to try and get enough of its essences to get it. Or you can sometimes, a demon in your party when it levels up has a random chance to give you an item, and sometimes it'll give you their essence. Not often. It was incredibly rare, but it did happen. And you cannot teach signature moves to anybody other than that demon. They'll still be on the spell list, I guess, in case you want to relearn it after you forgot it on that demon and you realize how good it was later.
That makes sense.
But you can't teach those to anybody but their original owner. The world is now much more open. It's divided effectively into 5 super levels that are absolutely ginormous for an SMT game. And you run around this area, and there's a lot more verticality and platformish, not platforming, because there's no real platforming puzzles or challenges, but just climbing around and exploring and looking for hidden stuff in the world that will get you some kind of progress somewhere. And the way you get expanded demon slots and passive abilities, like boosts to your fire spells and stuff like you did in SMT4's Demon Whisper system, is you get these giant blobby things that cover up the map. And if you beat them, you get a certain amount of a currency called glory, and you unlock, depending on which one of these mappy things you beat down, these map blocking things you beat down, you unlock different passives you can go into the shop and purchase for glory points.
And before some scumbag journalist says that SMT is now a Metroidvania.
Yeah, the levels don't really have any looping around. It's just linear exploration for the most part. You can cordon off parts of the map in your brain, except for the last map, which circles in on itself like 30 times and is confusing to navigate. But all the other maps are, you can easily cordon off a portion of the map and say, okay, I've explored everything in this chunk. Now let's move on to the next chunk. And if you're just good at dividing the maps like that in your brain, you'll be able to fully explore these places fairly easily. And that's really it for the gameplay side that I can think of that's worth mentioning. In general, the hardest part of the game is the early game, like all SMT games. Until you can really get a strategy going and get your feet under you, you're gonna be stumbling a bit. Like, I ran into a roadblock with Mermaid, of all stupid things. And because she's the first enemy that has an AoE spell. And you just don't have access to very many things at level 10. But once you get over her and you start being able to fuse stuff with AoE of your own and work out a proper strategy and get good skills on everybody, or just passable skills on everybody, it becomes a much smoother ride the whole way through. And I didn't die at all after level 10, 20,
Was
after
she the
Mermaid,
one-
basically.
Was she the one that was blessed with an excessive amount of fan art?
Yes,
Of course she was.
because she was not blessed with an excessive amount of clothes. In fact, she has no clothes. So yeah, that's the gameplay side of it. And if that's what you're looking for in an SMT game, go buy this game right now. It's SMT 3 and 4, but better. In every single way. The only hitch I have with the gameplay is the game runs at 24 frames a second, and they were a bit too ambitious with some of their environments and their particle effects. And that 24 already feels a little chuggy if you're used to 30 and 60 FPS games. It's going to really chug anywhere there's any kind of dust storm or particle effect. And we're talking dips into the high teens.
That sounds incredibly unpleasant.
Yes. They were way too ambitious with their environment design, and aiming for a stable 24 was a good goal, but they really needed to cut down the amount of dust particles on the screen. And the Switch just ain't that juicy of a box.
It really isn't.
But other than that, every other bit of the gameplay is fine. Except for one quirk I'll mention. And it only really applies to one demon being overpowered. And that is Idun, who's a new demon. She looks like Little Red Riding Hood, despite being, a Norse god. Or a Greek god. Is she Greek or Norse? I forget. Keeper of the Golden Apples. Idun.
The Golden Apple story is a Greek one, isn't it?
Yeah. That's what I thought. I was losing my mind for a second.
Although
Anyway.
there might be more than one
Let's
Golden
see.
Apple story. Because wasn't that the cause of the Battle of Troy in Legend?
I think so. And she has references to that in her side quest. Norse mythology, it says, for Idun. Yeah. I thought it was Norse, but I thought the Golden Apple story was Greek. So I did a double take after I said it. Anyway.
A golden apple appears in lots of mythologies, I think.
Yeah.
There's like 3 different golden apple stories just in Greek mythology.
Yeah. So if you've been keeping up with the SMT5 memes and news, you'll know how OP Idun is. If you're playing the game blind like I was, you'll still know how OP Idun is. Because she is the fusible at some stupidly early level after you do her side quest, like level 40-ish, a little bit over 40. And she comes with a skill called Golden Apple. This has built-in luster candy and moderate heal for everybody. It costs an insane amount of MP, but if you're me and pretty much everybody else that saw this skill, what you're going to do is you're going to drag Idun around with you all the way to the end game and just keep pumping her with all your instances that you get to crank her MP through the roof so she can actually use it.
Looks like Idun is just the goddess of apples in general. Like that's her thing, apples.
Yeah, I'll post a picture of her. So she is the only demon that is just horribly busted in terms of just how OP she is for how early you get her. And she is absolutely necessary if you plan to do the DLC super boss. You will not beat it without Idun. Nothing else can heal as good as she can and buff the party at the same time. So she's the only egregious case of a new demon being just busted. Shiva got a new ability that's also busted, but he's the super boss if you don't have the DLC, so that's okay in my book. He has an ability that's an almighty attack that hits all enemies and drops their defense down greatly, so to the minimum for 2 turns. So not quite debilitate, but if you're just trying to cream another super boss in particular very, very hard, he's really good for that. And then there's that's pretty much it for mentioning specific demons. And then there is the thing people are curious about, because this is always hit and miss with SMT games in general. And that's what type of story are we looking at? So to put some context in this, SMT5 is trying to be Nocturne, but modern. It is not trying to ape SMT4 at all. SMT4 tried to tell a much more character-driven, big, expansive story that the writer didn't get to cram all into one game because he wrote like a giant tome worth of story that they could not turn into translate into a video game script. Like, the thing was something like multiple thousands of pages for just the outline. So they had this big, deep, character-driven, complex story for SMT4, and they've completely abandoned that for SMT5. They have taken that model and chucked it clean out the window. For the worse, I think, because the story in SMT5 basically doesn't exist.
Oh, wow, it's that vague.
Yeah, it's not vague. You understand what's going on. It's just there's no meat to it. It's very shallow. The characters that are there...
And then we did this thing, and then we did that thing, and then we did that thing, and then it was over.
Oh no,
yeah,
he did a thing.
And it has... It feels like the only reason characters are even in this story is to have your obligatory alignment reps, with some of them taking absolutely laughably face heel turns near the end just to be antagonists.
Yeah, that was the sort of thing I always found was a bit wonky about most of the SMT stories, is that everybody is in opposition to everybody else for the sole reason seems to be that the writer is a little bit Nietzschean and thinks that the only currency in the world is power. That seems to be the only driving force, because ultimately everybody just fights everyone else at the end. Nobody ever forms an alliance with anybody else. Nobody ever compromises with anybody else. Everyone picks one absolute ideal and tries to murder everybody who doesn't hold it.
Yeah, and I like what they tried to do with the alignments mechanically in this game. They made neutral a proper path, but it is not the golden ending. In fact, it has the most dour ending out of all of them. If you go the neutral route, you effectively leave the world in a terrible state that is wholly uncertain and likely will just devolve as time goes on. And then the chaos ending is the most optimistic, but in that one you're also the most maniacal, so it makes sense you would be proud of what you made. And law is law.
Oh, it's just law.
Yeah, well, we know that the SMT has a hate boner for law anyway.
Yeah, law is apparently much better received in the original Japanese. For the Japanese audience, they like it a lot better. But
I always go the law route, but I go the law route mainly because it always looks like they're trying to make every route that isn't the law route look appealing. It's like, no, Amane was the best waifu in this game, so that's the route I'm going.
Yeah, so your law reps are a Raido Kuzunoha ripoff and Nua for the neutral route, Snake Girl. And then you have spoilers and the nerdy looking guy who looks all prim and proper and like he would be the law route rep as the chaos route reps instead. And then you have the dude who's breaking the fashion trends with his hat on weird and is kind of the dude bro character, and one of the archangels as your law reps.
An archangel makes sense, but...
Yeah, it looks like they were going for something here, but they decided to prune the story down to almost nothing. So the fact that these characters don't fit the visual theme of the route they're assigned to doesn't hit at all. It's just kind of weird.
Well, Devil Survivor tended to have neutral routes, didn't it?
Well, Devil Survivor had character roots more than alignment roots. It did have the Messiah.
They were always very, very heavily tinged with an alignment, though.
Like, Devil Survivor have upside down boobs.
Yeah, Devil Survivor has upside down boobs.
Right.
There was
there's even like Devil Survivor 1 had the neckbeard route.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It had you picked anybody that wasn't Amane or Kane's route was pretty much just a character driven route. I felt like more than alignment tinged.
Some of them were like the musician one was definitely not about alignment, but I felt like the what's his name, the neckbeard route I feel was like deliberately supposed to be neutral. Like it was meant to be alignment neutral. It wasn't meant to be a character route because it's like his entire shtick is to just shut down factionalism. Like, we're just gonna end this entire project and everybody else can go hang.
Yeah, in Devil Survivor, they that series definitely pushes neutral as an ending type like
But
that.
that's why I say I think it's like the writers show through in these things, like the sort of the ethos with which each branch of the franchise is written have very specific ways of doing it, and the SMT classic SMT one is everybody must pick an ideal and hate everybody who doesn't hold that ideal forever, and the Devil Survivor one seems to be very everyone should be a fence sitter and anybody who does hold ideals is a bad person.
Yeah. In general, I think Devil Survivor 1 at least handles its routes very well.
Yeah, I think the Devil Survivor one has the best hybrid, I think, of the alignment with character,
And it's
because the
its law
characters
route.
the characters don't feel like they're coming at their alignment in an unnatural way, the way they often do in SMT.
Yeah, and its law route doesn't end in some mechanical future where everything is terrible. The law
Well,
route actually has some hope to it.
It still ends in a pretty awful way. In that you get insta-jibbed if you do anything wrong. It's pretty tyrannical, generally speaking.
But relative to what they're usually like.
Yeah. Relative to like the stagnant, crystallized world where nothing ever happens.
Yeah. So there's that. But yeah, SMT5, right. So the thing is, I've told you the entire story of the game now. Pick your route, which ending do you want? There's nothing else. There's nothing.
Are they at least going to make a reasonably dedicated attempt to sell you on their route, or are you just expected to pick one arbitrarily?
It just they give you a binary choice at the end of the game if your alignment doesn't add up. You can just change it. And no, they don't try to sell you their route. They try a little bit with the law route. They're a little more law friendly in this one than they are in some of the other SMTs. But they still just don't use the characters in any of the routes enough to convince you. Like the neutral rep is just a douchebag who comes up and you punch him a bunch. And you run into him multiple times. Like that is not convincing me to take your side.
But he has a hot snake waifu.
He does, and she is incredibly OP in the late game, and you can't get her till you beat the game, so I don't count her in my normal list of demon scalings. She is for post game only. But yeah, I was very disappointed with everything about the story in this game. The biggest mystery they set up is the avatar of that has been masquerading as the Great Will, the usual law rep, is gone. He's just poofed. And it was established in For an Apocalypse that the thing that's been masquerading as the Christian God isn't really him, and that it's a avatar that it once used, and that what they call the Great Will, and is for all intents and purposes a alternate interpretation of what a monotheistic deity would be from that is benevolent in some way. And they're like, oh well, the Christian God's clearly one of that thing's avatars. No, that thing's been corrupted and broken forever and has not been in use by the Great Will forever, and now that thing's just gone poof. So the throne of the Creator is now open for whoever wants to go sit on it, and the world's slowly decaying because of it. So people have to go fight each other to go figure out who's going to sit on the throne.
So everybody is basically everybody is going the might is right route.
Yeah, like this is all just doesn't sell you on any route at all. I went Chaos for my first playthrough because at the point I was at with the story, when I was about to hardlock myself, I just didn't care, and I just picked the demons I wanted for post game. Because that is how little the story was influencing me at that point. It you could literally skip every single cutscene and just infer what's going on, and you'd be fine. You wouldn't miss anything. It's a real shame because even Nocturne had the little bit of character interaction it does have, and the little bits of world building with the main story do add up to a fairly meaty and chunky world that you can really sink your teeth into. SMT5 just ain't very deep.
Honestly, I mostly just found the story in Nocturne to be, well, basically all of Nocturne for that matter just seemed to be sort of an exercise in surrealism.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
really out there with everything, but it still shows you a compelling world with the inverted world and the way the Amala network's set up and the way power operates in that world and how its systems work. All of that is way more interesting because they actually go into it a little bit without answering all of your questions to leave you some room to think about it yourself. In SMT5, you know pretty much everything about how the system works, and it doesn't take them very long to explain it. And that's just that, and there's nothing else to it. And the characters are really shallow that you're in the world with, and them attaching to their ideologies isn't based on any events that happen to them aside from the law rep. It's just who they are. So you don't get to see or grow with these characters. They try in the second chapter, in the second big act where you explore the second zone, but it just doesn't land. So unfortunately, if you're going into this for a SMT type world to go and sift through and really sink your teeth into, go play Strange Journey or Devil Survivor or something instead. If you haven't played those yet, it ain't worth it for that. But if you're in it for the SMT gameplay, yeah, go for it. Go ham. I have not beat the Demi-Fiend yet because he is such a number block that being max level with yourself and everybody in your party isn't going to get you there. You need to go farm instances and go farm essences to get the perfect skill set. And this includes like null insta-death and all ailments, as well as null physical on everybody, just to even have a shot. And even then, he's still a nightmare in just how high his numbers are cranked.
Well, that's how those are supposed to be honest.
Yeah, but I'm just so not invested in this world. I don't know if I'm going to do the grind to go do it. I sincerely doubt I am, actually. Right. So that's SMT5. Great gameplay, not so great story. Okay, next we have Tales of Arise. This has been one that was on the playlist. I got it for Christmas, and right after SMT5, I jumped into Tales of Arise. And of the two games, I'm going to recommend Tales of Arise more when everything's said and done. And I'm throwing it out here now in case I get too bogged down in the negatives again, like I tend to. That because Tales of Arise tells a much more complete, if not as well, I'll get into it different. Let's take a different approach. I have a history with the Tales series. I played every game since Graces to completion and have finished all the ones prior to that. Not all the ones, but all the ones that were easily available in the US, I should say, from Symphonia onwards. So Symphonia, Abyss, and all them. Vesperia, I played whenever they were around and relevant in the times that they were new games. And then from Graces onward, I have completed every single one 100%. And the gameplay is about as close to getting back to Graces as we can hope to get to. Because that's been the biggest complaint with the Tales series since Xillia, basically, is Tales of Graces did the combat way better in this. Why aren't we just playing Graces instead?
Yeah, I feel like Graces is like a pity about the everything else sort of thing, because the combat system was great. Like it was, it's not so much that there was any particular thing I liked about Grace's combat system so much as I felt like it was a proper evolutionary system compared to what you mostly saw in JRPGs. Like they actually advanced the way things were done and showed, oh, well, there's this more engaging, sort of slightly more action-oriented way of doing the same sort of paced combat style that JRPGs have historically used. Except that then they just used it as a one-off thing, like it was artifact weapons or something, and then discarded it.
Yeah. So what they've done is they've taken Bersuria's combat system and said, okay, what doesn't work with this? And done their best to iterate on it. Instead of just completely reinventing the wheel every time they release a new game like they have been, they've taken Bersuria's model and said, okay, we're going to use this as a standard and we're going to build off of it and clean it up. Which was a much better idea than just, completely changing the combat system every single game. It's still different, but it has a lot of the ebb and flow of combat that Berseria does, where you're really trying to push offense hard and getting knocked off your feet and losing momentum can really swing against you, and you're pushing for momentum in the fights more than anything else. And they've done this in two particular ways. One, which is great for gameplay and awful for presentation, is the change to Mystic Arts the enemies use. Enemy Mystic Arts don't just do a quadrillion damage to one party member or whoever's in range. Instead, what they do is they trigger an animation that causes the boss to go invulnerable if they go off, and the boss will do a preset attack pattern that, as the difficulty and the fight and the later in the game you are go up, the more complex the pattern is. And it will eventually end in their big signature at the end of it. And then you have the opportunity to get out of the way of this absurd barrage of abilities. It's not just a done deal. Whoever's near the boss is going to die and get that life bottle on standby. The other way they've done it is, instead of limiting you to art chains, they have added a basic attack function, which is really simple, but when you think about it, all of the Tales games don't have a basic attack. You have arts and art strings that you chain together, and maybe a special action. In this game, you have a basic attack button, and this allows you to extend combos and chain together arts that normally wouldn't chain together. You notice this in Berseria if you played it a lot, especially with characters like Eisen or Velvet. Where
Yeah, I found that I could not make Velvet work. I basically stopped using her because I couldn't get the hang of how to make her combo into things, and she was ridiculously combo dependent.
Yeah. So I mained Eisen and Velvet in Berseria, and the last
I made Magilu.
Yeah, you tortured yourself doing that.
Yeah.
No, it was great. Like by the time you get to sort of the late game, she can just blow things up by looking at them.
But
So
still Magilu.
Like,
No, that's
Magilu's
not
great. She is like the best character.
Magilu's awesome. Make coo like a dove, Velvet. But yeah, so the basic attack allows you to, in between arts, just hit a basic button that doesn't do any damage, but allows you to keep your combo going and keep the enemy in its stunned or break state, and keep that combo rolling with arts that don't normally chain together. Now, you still can't chain everything together, and some arts kick you too far away from the enemy for you to use, which places them firmly on the finisher of a combo chain. But in general, just having a basic attack option allows them to use that type of 3D runaround system way more and get way more creative with the basic arts you can have by just having this basic attack that can let you chain together more different ones. They've also removed the art chain on a single button. That's gone now. You now can assign basic attack and 3 arts to any key you want to with rebinding. And then later in the game, you get access to a second set where if you hold L2, you can assign 3 more to those same 3 art buttons. And you can chain them together in whatever order you want. But if you use an art more than 3 times within a certain time frame, its scaling gets tanked. So you're incentivized to mix it up and make sure you're doing proper combos. And that in general just makes the game a lot of fun to play, because it's fun experimenting with the different arts your characters get, and just getting used to how things roll with the game. And I just enjoyed random combat in that game. I love fighting in it, and I think it is a very solid entry into the series for its gameplay by itself. This next part I am biased on, and that's the story of Arise. This isn't one I'm going to just blatantly spoil everything, because it's actually worth seeing if you're interested in it. It's coming off of Berseria, which I really, really, really liked, and there was no way it was going to top it. And it just feels a little too shallow compared to the game we just came off of. But it's still fine on its own, even if the characters are insanely optimistic about the world and the nature of people. It's like they all deeply believe in the innate goodness of people, despite knowing that's not true, and that everything will just be K if we just liberate the currently oppressed people.
Oh, so she's early Stormblood Lys.
Yeah, and they do acknowledge this.
Everyone's just going to join her merry band of rebels, and then they're going to liberate Alamigo, and everything will be fine. Yeah. And then she gets completely rebuffed at every turn, and everything goes wrong.
Yeah, and that's the part of the story I think that's missing. They get to the part where they acknowledge that's a problem, and they'll have to work through it. but they'll just and we got to find a way to properly set up a system of governance that doesn't lead to this kind of cycle of hatred and vengeance, where everybody's just whoever's in power is just oppressing whoever's under them. And they get to the point of talking about that, but we don't actually get to see any of that in the game. The game ends right before the rebuilding phase starts, and we don't even see it in the epilogue. And I think that really is the big hampering point for the overall arching story.
Are you sure they're not just planning to release the F edition, which has that chapter?
It's possible.
I mean, because the main thing that I've heard about that game is incredibly cynical take on DLC.
Yeah. So the DLC isn't as bad as people have been making it out to be. It's not good, but it's not bad either. I didn't purchase any DLC for the game. And I didn't feel pestered by it. Yeah, whenever you sleep at camp, there's a DLC button, but you can just ignore it. It doesn't flash or glow or put a notification icon there.
Or say enchantment.
Yeah, it's just a button at the far end of the camp menu when you can rest to recover your HP and CP. That's another thing they did with the gameplay before I move on. You can't heal infinitely anymore. Healing is not just an art you set somebody to cast and that's their job. Healing is something that consumes a new resource called cure points. And
I already hate it.
The things to replenish this in the field are more expensive than resurrection items by a factor of 3.
So just let people die then and bring them back.
Yeah, they revive with 1 HP at the end of the fight. But there are camps everywhere, so when exploring this isn't a problem. In dungeons, it really puts the pinch on you and making you not use the melee characters whenever something's about to hit really hard. Because while Law does a whole lot of damage, he's also a melee fisticuffs type character that is going to get creamed by everything the boss does. And he's going to eat all of your CP, getting healed by Xion.
In other words, main Magilu.
Yeah. Well, you can main... the closest equivalent to Magilu is Rin, and she has some cool mechanics. I played her a little bit. But I played the game on moderate difficulty, which is a step above normal, but 1 step below the hardest base difficulty that's available. And unfortunately, enemies get so spongy at that difficulty that you pretty much have to switch to Alphen in the boss fights and the harder trash fights, because he has an ability. His gimmick for his playstyle is after using an art, you can press and hold. You can keep the button held down, and he'll charge up this big fire move that drains his health, and the longer you hold the button, and trades that health for direct damage onto the enemy with a multiplier on it. So, in fact, what you have to do is once the boss finishes a long attack and gives you enough recovery frames to get away with it, you dump your entire health bar into the hardest hitting move you can whack the boss with, and just throw your fire cyclone at him and watch a quarter of his health disappear. And if you don't do this, you're going to be there for like 40 minutes a boss fight, even for the mini bosses. So that's a thing to note when playing this game, is it really pushes you to play Alphen, but you can get away with playing Rinwell, the caster, or any of the other hard DPS ones. You could probably get away playing Law, who's the melee fisticuffs character, as long as you're really good at dodging. The other two, Xion, the girl that's in all the posters, is the healer, so you don't want to play her. And guy whose name I forget, you really can't get away. The other guy in the party, you can't get away with playing him because he's also the other healer, the single target healer instead of the AoE healer. And you don't want to take his role out. And then the other character is Kisara. Kisara's a lot of fun because her gimmick is she can't dodge. She's in big chunky armor and wields a big shield, but you can perfect Royal Guard all kinds of stuff, and you can counterattack if you Royal Guard. And while you're guarding just a normal block, you can do different variations of her arts. So she's fun to get away with, but none of those characters do as much damage as Alphen's. I'm just going to trade my entire health bar for a quarter of the bosses. So if you're playing on moderate or higher, the sponginess is real, and you'll run into that when picking which character you prefer to play the most. So I would at least get familiar with Alphen and be ready to switch to him during a weak phase of the boss, so that you can just take his entire health bar and throw it at the boss.
Sometimes you just need to blow something up.
Yeah. The characters in the game, none of them really stand out, but none of them are bad. They fall very middle of the road for me for all of them. I didn't hate any of them, but I didn't attach to any of them. Like, there's no Magilu, there's no Aizen, there's no Rokuro and Aizen sitting down and teaching Laphicet how to be a man.
But that type of interaction is what makes Tales games worth playing. Like, unlike you, I was very ambivalent about the core plot and themes of Berseria. I loved the characters and the character interactions. I just thought that the core theme was kind of bunk. But the characters are what really made it for me. That's why I still enjoyed playing it, even though I didn't like the main story.
Yeah.
Because the character interactions are great, and Tales has always leaned into that.
Yeah. And you just don't have as strong of an attachment to these characters, even though they go through really emotional scenes and events, and you see events play out. They're just not as fun to be around as Aizen building his secret base. What come hell or high water, he's gonna build that tunnel. And the skits are the skits just don't sell them as well as they did in Berseria, or even
no performing troupe.
No performing troupe. Magulu's Menagerie is not there.
This is a grave loss to culture.
Which, yes, indeed. Which is unfortunate, but I don't want to put this as a point of it being a super big knock against the game, especially for Tales fans, because for a Tales game, it's still really good. It's just not quite at the tier with where we were at character-wise with Berseria. And the main story has probably the most optimistic and happy ending of all of them, if you take it at face value until you think about it for 3 seconds and remember what the characters were just saying about how, oh, wait a minute, after we free all the oppressed people, what's going to happen? What's going to happen next?
Yeah, what do?
So yeah, it's worth looking into if you like the Tales series and the way they tell their stories with the skits, but just don't go in expecting the characters to really hit it off with you like you would if you played Berseria or something. And there is one quirk I'll mention that I watched in a YouTube video later, because I didn't buy any of the DLC for this game, but I did beat the game. I 100%ed it, and it did not take very long either. It only took me like 35, 40 hours, maybe? Not even? Maybe 30?
It's really, really short for a Tales game.
For a Tales game, yeah.
Normally I sink like around 100 hours into a Tales game.
Yeah. This was doing all the subquests, but the subquests don't have much meat to them in this game. They're literally MMO style, go kill a thing, go fetch a thing, go deliver this thing, go talk to this dude. And they are, for the most part, very, very short. And they just don't eat much of your time, and most of that time is spent in the main story. In the post-game, you can zip through lickety-split. The post-game is really shallow without the DLC. And we get our guest characters returning. You get from past Tales games. And normally when the guest characters show up, you get like, Luke from Abyss shows up, and what's his nuts that I'm brain farting on from Symphonia shows up, and maybe the Fantasia guys show up, and representatives from the last 2 or 3 games show up.
Many belts.
What about Belts McGee?
Yeah, Asbelt. Well, Asbelt wasn't the cameo character in Berseria, it was Sophie.
He was probably...
I really like Sophie better.
Yeah, so...
well, she was the real main character anyway, so...
Yeah, Asbelt was just there to move the camera and wear belts.
Yeah,
and say friendship a lot.
He was a belt transport device.
Yeah, that uttered many things about friendship.
Friendship.
And
Belts.
in this one, we don't get any throwbacks to anything other than Zestiria and Berseria. The only 2 guest characters that show up are Aizen and Edna. And that's great. We finally get to see those 2 together on screen for a bit. And it's implied they're having a nice touching reunion together. And it's something that the fans would like to see. But aside from getting to punch them both at the same time, we don't see any of that. So instead, what they've done is they have franchise crossover cameos in bonus boss battles. You know where this is going. And it's even worse than you think it is.
Oh no.
Instead, if you buy the DLC, instead of this stuff just being, stuff for people that like to do the post-game content, you can see Sword Art Online crossover
There
with
it is.
Kirito and Asuna.
Wow, I saw that. I saw that being advertised.
Yeah.
Like literally the least cool people in the world.
Not only do they eat one of the spots for the guest characters, but their DLC comes with a unique boss fight, or 3 unique boss fights, one against each of them and both of them together, and a brand new Mystic art for Alphen,
Is it
plus outfits.
Jump Shark?
Yes. Is Alphen using his Mystic art, and then Asuna and Kirito coming in together to augment it with Starburst Stream. It's really dumb.
The thing that frustrates me more about the fact they did a crossover is that there's definitely a whole bunch of people who think that that's the coolest thing ever, and that makes me really sad and angry for some reason. Like, I am 100% in the stop having fun wrong camp when it comes to Sword Art Online.
Yeah, so it gets even worse if you play the dub. So for those that don't know, Bryce Papenbrook is the voice of Kirito in English. Bryce Papenbrook is also in bed with whoever dubs the Tales games and has been in pretty much every single Tales game. And that includes this one.
That's because
where
he's like generic anime protagonist number 1.
Well, it's because his daddy got him into the business and make sure he gets all the jobs he wants. And
So
Bryce Papenbrook only have one voice. He can't do more than one voice. It's like JYB voice, but worse. And he also voices Law, a main party member. So you have Bryce Papenbrook talking to himself in Bryce Papenbrook voice. And this is really funny if you watch a YouTube video of the fight. Just to hear Bryce Papenbrook yelling attacks at each other. It just completely ruins the fight.
Unspeakably cringe.
It is.
Everything that involved Bryce Papenbrook.
Yeah. So yeah. That's unfortunately where that bit of Tales sits.
Incidentally, the Funimation ads before Christmas told me one thing, is never get Bryce Papenbrook to voice an Australian. Or a Kiwi.
Don't get him to voice anything if you can help it.
Just don't employ him. He's a tool.
Just don't.
Yeah, he is old. He is old money. Daddy got him into everything, and he's riding his daddy's coattails through the whatever their guild is called for voice actors in California, and he just gets in everything and can only do one voice. And I just get sick of hearing him. Like, I really think I would be way more on... I'm already pro-dub in that I don't hate dubs like everybody else does.
Dubs aren't necessarily
But anytime Bryce Papenbrook shows up, I'm like, again?
Yeah.
Because he always has a central role or a main supporting character role in everything. So, yeah, that's a thing. Anyway, that's the Tales series. I could talk about mine and Abo's adventures through the Halo series. I can go zippity click through that. And that I did. Remember what your friend did for Yuval, where he took you through the Halo games?
Ugh, why?
So
He
I
made
did that.
me suffer for Halo 4.
Yeah. So I had only played Halo 4 at a friend's house, and only to just see the story at the time. I had not played Halo 5 yet. I'd watched it on YouTube though, and already forgot everything. Halo 1, 2, 3. Halo 1 is Halo 1. I mean, it's a classic game with a classic game feel to it, especially if you keep the old graphics on. It feels fine. Halo 2 is it's Halo 2. I have a lot of fond memories with Halo 2. Abo seemed to like it. Halo 3, I still think is the most fun one to just sit down and play with and just play as a video game. It just feels right in every way for what Halo's going for, and like Bungie really got to fit their stuff through it. Halo 4 is a dumpster fire of a game, and I forgot just how bad this game was.
No part of it makes sense. None of the mechanics make sense. None of the story makes sense. Everything about it is bad.
Yeah,
Just
whoever
didn't need to
decided...
be.
Yeah. Even if... I've seen some people trying to forgive the story, like the big Halo fanboys, but even they won't defend Halo 4's gameplay.
The story is like modern Blizzard tier.
Yeah, it's bad. But
They just make up crap as they go along.
yeah, and Halo 5 is even worse in that regard, and that I had the graphic pulled up around here somewhere, because this is flippin' retarded. Where is it? Copy image. For Halo 5, you have to have read or watched all of this stuff to even begin to interpret what's going on.
Just like Blizzard.
Yeah. And Halo 4 also pulls from the expanded universe, but also doesn't explain any of the new stuff that comes up. Like, why are there still Covenant elites that are fighting? Why is the Covenant still got a rogue faction that's active after their leaders have all been killed? Do we get to find out any of this stuff? The chief mentions it once in the first level, like, why are we still fighting elites? And then that's all you hear. That's all she wrote. No, this is never explained ever again. And then you have to do the gameplay, where you have these terrible Promethean weapons for most of the game that have the accuracy of, I don't know, something really bad. I can't metaphor today. But they're really, really bad.
Yeah, they're really atrocious, and you only use them because there's ammo for them around.
Yeah, and this game has horrible ammo problems, so you're forced to use them, because if you're in a section fighting against Promethean enemies, they're going to be dropping them, and that's all you're going to have on hand. And the knights that teleport randomly, and you don't know if they're teleporting for an attack or to run away while they go recharge their shields, who decided that was a good idea?
A dumb person. A very
Yes.
dumb person.
Yeah, so Halo 4 is awful in every way, shape, and form. And I heard it was even worse with the multiplayer, because Halo maps were about map control, where you would, weapons would spawn at certain points on the map, and controlling those areas of the map was important and part of the gameplay. In Halo 4, what spawned where was random?
Yeah, that's why there was no Halo 4 multiplayer scene.
Yeah,
It just wasn't a thing.
It was DOA. Dead on Arrival, not Dead or Alive. But and then Halo 5 apparently had an okay multiplayer, but its story is even more hot garbage. Its gameplay is a little bit better, but it's still awful. Especially when you compare it to Halo 3 or Halo 2 or even Halo Reach. So yeah, he's now been caught up through the Halo games, and we've been playing a little bit of the Infinite multiplayer. He's been streaming it because his PC can't run it. So he bought Game Pass Ultimate and has been streaming the game, and that's been interesting. And we played probably about 12, 15 matches so far, and it's good fun. It's I still don't like Sprint being in a Halo game. I don't think it fits at all.
Yeah, I've heard that that's like the major point of contention. I'm not a Halo person. Like, I don't think it's much good, generally speaking. I was never involved in that community, so I never developed even a trace of affection for it, since I was purely a PC gamer in that phase of my gaming history, and it was like Unreal Tournament or go home.
Yeah.
So Sprint's contentious because it just, there's never been Sprint in Halo until Reach, and then it was a power up you could take, and then they made it standard, and it changed how you moved around the maps a lot, and it just doesn't fit with the normal pace of Halo. Where knowing how long somebody's going to be exposed and being able to set up an ambush or set up a sniper on the ridge to go watch that spot as part of the gameplay. And that's just removed with Sprint, because somebody's just going to zip through the open spot and you can't keep it covered. Unless you got somebody that's, a 19-year-old with Twitch reflexes at MLG tier, they're not going to hit the guy that's sprinting. So it doesn't feel very good to do it either, because knowing you're already going at max speed changes how you think about moving around a map. But other than that, everything feels fine in Infinite. Some of the guns are a little weird. Still don't quite know how some of them work, but it's been fun poking at it. I don't think I'll poke at it very much, but it was a good distraction for about a day or two. And that covers all the media I wanted to cover from the time I was gone, I think. I'm kind of running long here, so let's wrap it there.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot of news to really go through. We'll probably dig a bunch of it up for next.
Oh, is there any other news stories y'all particularly really wanted to jump into that we have posted or that y'all saw?
I honestly Oh, that's a scam.
Yeah, I'm honestly astonished that anybody can see it as anything else. It seems so against natural human thinking.
Yeah,
But
like
the China Steam story is important, but I haven't really looked into it.
It's also like saying the sky is blue.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's going to happen, but I mean, Steam still has to make a response. Like, in a business sense, it's still important to respond. But I don't think there's anything particularly critical to discuss unless you want to have a lengthy and in-depth discussion about whether or not Wyverians lay eggs.
No.
No.
No?
As much as I'd
No?
like to take my obligatory scheduled pee on New World this week, that might have to wait as well.
That game's still running, huh?
Yeah,
They
still
haven't shut
running.
it down yet.
They've put out some patch notes actually for their test realm, which they may or may not act. Last
Is there
time
a
they put
betting
something.
pool on whether on what the estimated time that it's got left before it joins the graveyard of Amazon games?
I don't think it's gonna be. They've sunk that much into it. They had such a roaring success, and then they ruined it. But yeah,
Well, it just seems like they're bad at running a game. Ultimately, they're just
Every-
bad at it.
every game that Amazon Game Studios has put out has been a failure.
Kind
Not
of
a good track
impressive when you,
record.
kind of impressive when you think about it.
Yeah, like even
Not,
some
not
of
the sort
worst
of
studios
impressive
had
you
it.
really want, though.
Blah, blah, blah.
So yeah, this show was mostly recapping the weeks while we've been gone and giving y'all some thoughts on the media we experienced in the meantime.
Yeah, I'm sure that the industry will wake up. The only people who never went on holiday were the people generating Blizzard scandals.
Yeah,
Because those just came thick and fast the entire time.
Hey,
yeah.
here's an interesting option. Should I put Sexy Gaze on Matador?
No, because Sexy
No.
Gaze is awful.
Sexy Gaze is
Awful.
actually awful, but
But for the memes.
but for the memes,
Wait, you're
she can. Yeah, as you said earlier, it's really tough to justify putting a buff on a demon because
Yeah, in-
anything that's
in
really going to
SMT3
benefit from it.
in SMT3. Don't even bother
Yeah.
with status ailments. It's not worth it. They're not even with the bonus bosses. Is it worth it with the cheese strats? It's just better to just do them legit.
Yeah. You can...
Oh, that's another thing with SMT5.
Oops.
Physical skills cost MP now, which makes building the physical build clearly the optimal build
Oh yeah.
because their overscaled damage is still there. They cost a lot of MP, and the demons that have them generally have a low MP pool. But that's not stopping your protagonist from having a low MP pool.
Yeah, like
Well,
my
I
Demi
love
Fiend here is a
physical
physical
builds.
brawler. Although I need another.
I build physical in every SMT game.
Well, in
And
SMT5,
And
Because-
all the Persona games and
he'll be OP in SMT5 then.
But yeah,
even though it caused me suicide multiple times in Nocturne.
Yeah.
First Fiend. And he's this jerk.
Stupid
I
tigers.
don't know who this jerk is.
Not at all. That jerk.
Oh, right. Him.
Him. So yeah, that's how things work. If anyone ever gives you a hard time in life, just enslave them.
I see.
With
That's how it
that
works.
terrible life lesson.
Life lessons from Fernurian.
Yeah,
Pro-slavery.
Well, I mean, this is new Australia, not old Australia. This is new Australia.
oh boy. So anyhow, we should, let's get out of here.
All right, folks. Email topic of the week. What'd you do over Christmas break?
Do.
Let us know.
Did you actually get some time off? Because we didn't.
Yeah. Still, made the most of the time I had off and managed to finish 2 games. So I'll take it.
That's something.
So yeah, I think that's it, folks. We'll see you next week. Sayonara. Bye bye.